All right, we got time. I hereby call the Governance and Priorities Committee for the City of Lloydminster meeting. As a reminder, all members of council are obligated to declare a conflict of interest or a pecuniary interest as per section 133 of the Lloydminster Charter regarding any item on this agenda. This meeting is for discussion and information gathering only. All decisions will occur during regular council meetings. We thank all our presenters for their time. Moving on to the agenda, item number 2 is the approval agenda. I look for council for direction. Council. Oh, any additions? My apologies. Additions. Clerk.
Yes, Your Worship. We have one item for an addition, and it is a wastewater treatment facility project delivery, and we request that be added at 5.9.
5.9, all right. Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 5.7, proposed fire department staffing. I believe that should be moved to in camera because there's salaries and personnel involved.
All right.
Sorry.
Okay, Councilor.
No, I was just going to say the vast majority of the presentation, I imagine, is meant for public consumption. If we have any questions specific to personnel, we can save those for an in-camera portion. Am I incorrect in assuming that?
I believe the information presented at this time given the pack that we've got, Councilor Baker, I don't think there'll be any discussion about salaries or anything like that. So I don't believe that there'll be at this time, but please go ahead.
Well, if I may, Your Worship, I believe there's a lot of things missing in the report. It's really not much different than the original presentation. And whatever you like is fine, but...
Well, I appreciate where you're at. I think that I share some of the comments you have, so I think that'll come up with after the chief gives his presentation. We'll have the opportunity to ask some questions and seek some more further clarification. And I'd like to leave it if you're agreeable at this time, but we'll be certainly aware of that fact. Councilor Corson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to add item 8.3, an in-camera item under policy advice.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other changes proposed to the agenda? Not seeing any, I will ask for direction from council on the amended agenda.
Sorry, I move that the agenda dated January 22nd, 2018 be amended, or be approved as amended.
Be approved as amended. Seconded. Councilor Batchak. Any further discussion? Not seeing any, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to item number 3 on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the last meeting that was held. They may have been circulated. I'll look for council for direction, please.
Move approval of minutes. I can't pull up the last date, sorry. So
I believe it's November 20th.
November 20th.
Seconder, Councilor Forson. Any further discussion or comments? If not, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to agenda item number 4, public presentations. I believe we have representatives from ATCO Electric, and I'd like to welcome Perry and Dave if they'd like to come forward.
Good afternoon. I'm sure how close I got to talking to this. I'm not talking that far now. Okay, hello, my name is Perry Flown. I'm the area supervisor here for ATCO Electric Lloydminster. I got with me Dave Evans, the district manager, and we're very happy to be here today to do a presentation on the LED conversion multiplier. So just to make it clear, it has nothing to do with the pilot that we did along college. This is a totally separate initiative, just so that's clear with everybody. All right. Okay, so the LED multiplier is a initiative ATCO Electric went to the AUC, and we got it approved in principle. That's why we're moving forward with it. It will apply to LED conversion multipliers in place. Will replace capital contribution for the conversion. So the multiplier takes the place of any capital contribution for the cost of conversion. So the LED conversion multiplier is currently at 7.2%, which is roughly $32 a light per year. So it's an addition to the bill. Okay, the next one. So this is a little busy, this one. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about the numbers. But what we've more or less done to determine this multiplier is taking the estimated cost of converting these lights minus the estimated maintenance savings over the distribution charge on the invested light rate, which in the city of Lloyd, all your lights are on the invested rate. So every single light in the city of Lloyd is able to use this multiplier except for the ones above 250 watt. I'll explain that a little later. So when doing this calculation, again, I'm not going to tell you where all these numbers come from, but that's where we got the 7.2%, which is $32 a light per year. So what we've done here is shown roughly what 100 watt HPS, which is majority of what the city has, would cost. So the yearly cost as it sits right now is $505 a year. Now if we reduce that from 100 watt down to 41 watt, add the multiplier of $32 a year, the net cost is now $504. Okay, not a lot of difference, but it's a savings of $1. Okay? So this multiplier is, we're anticipating it'll be in place 3 to 5 years. So after, you know, the 5-year period, if the numbers all come in, which we hope they will, you'll see even more savings on per light of roughly, in this case, another $32 a year. Now, the multiplier is a bit of a moving target. It's based on calculations of savings and estimated cost of converting the lights. Other utilities have done the same model, and their multiplier at most it lasted 5 years from the research we've done. So what this shows here is the cost of energy, kind of an average cost for the last, I believe, 4 years. Now the Alberta price protection states that it'll cost of energy, kilowatt hours, will be no more than 6.8 cents. That's the cap they put on it until May 2021. The city of Lloyd's rate right now is 5.8 cents per kilowatt hour. So based on this graph, if you're paying 5.5 cents per kilowatt hour, with the multiplier in place, it'd be a net zero. It would just be a wash. Because your energy rate is a little higher, that's where you see the dollar savings after the multiplier is added for the 100 watt light. So right now the city of Lloyd has 1,547 100 watt lights, 150 watt they have 774, and the 250 watt they have 422. Now the city also has 400 watt HPS lights. The multiplier only applies to the 100, 150, and 250 because that is all that we have as a standard right now at ATCO, and that's what we stock. Now you can see that you would have definitely a savings on the 400 watt light as well, which is something we can talk about at a later time. But it would not be, the multiplier would not be applied to that. It would be a full-fledged capital cost if you were there. And that's something to talk about later because there's some substantial savings there as well. So based on, okay, so 100 watt, we say you're going to save a bucket a light per year. So that's an easy calculation, $1,547 a year. What do you think your net total would be of savings based on the numbers we have there in your lights? Any guesses?
$5,000.
Okay, a little low. Ready? So the city, if you converted all the lights to LED, again, the 250 HPS and lower, the savings per year for the city, and this includes with the multiplier added to each light, is just over $11,000 a year. So once the multiplier is gone, the savings would be that much more per year. Multiplier is roughly $80,000 a year. So after that multiplier is gone, the city would see roughly, based on your 5.8 kilowatt hours, would see another $80,000 saving.
And is that 2021 when it's gone, Gary?
No, 2021, well, that is just the where the government has put a cap on energy. So after 2021, you know, who knows where it could end up going. So what this program more or less does The multiplier provides an option for municipalities to change all their HPS lights to LED light technology ahead of end-of-life replacement and in place of capital construction lights. So right now your lights are all invested. So if one of them gets knocked out or breaks or quits working, right now we're putting on LED heads. No extra costing. That's our standard now, all LED heads. But you can tell with 2,400 lights, it's probably going to take a while for that to happen. It's going to be the one-offs. You might have one here. The nice part about the light we use is it's close to what's there now as far as color. So you may not, unless you're really looking for it, you may not be able to tell, because I know there's a few out there in the middle of nowhere, and no one's ever said, oh, what's that one doing there? So that's the nice part about it. But again, the energy savings is what we're looking at doing. Yeah.
I was just curious, what's the capital cost then to do early replacement? I don't know if I missed that.
So if you were to just wholesale change the lights right now, let's say you guys came to us and you want to change all LED without the program rating, it would cost the city roughly $1.3 million to change all those lights. This multiplier allows the city to take advantage of this technology, take advantage of the savings ahead of end of life.
Okay. Just on the $11,000, that number as it stands right now, that's for the city as a whole?
City as a whole.
Okay. And this doesn't apply, oh yeah, yeah, thanks.
So Barry, if I understood correctly, you're saying 3 to 5 years is the estimated payback?
That's the estimated, it's not a payback.
Or
it's
the cover off
the multiplier. Because what it is we're adding an additional cost to the existing rate, okay, which has HPS lights in it. We don't have an actual LED rate. By adding this multiplier, that looks after the capital cost to do that. Once all the 20,000 lights that ATCO has gets converted over, then that will become the rate, and the rate will determine how that money is paid and what the rate will be. Again, the rates, I'm not going to know how the rates are more or less determined, but there's lots of math done behind it. Once everything is converted, then we have actual data on the savings, the costs.
So just to be clear, so if this is done, the rate that the city pays, the rate changes because you've got an additional capital cost, and then they build a new rate based on that, and then it pays for itself more or less, but there's also an $11,000 savings at the end of the day? Because I'm just struggling, because payback is kind of my question. So if it's $11,000 and $1.3 million cost, and I understand 11 is the floor because it gets higher as that multiplier goes away, but that would take 130 years to pay off, or for a payback period if it was 11,000 and 1.3 million. So I understand that there's something different that's happening with the actual utility rate. I'm just a little confused right now.
So what happens is, because we can't charge the same amount for HPS lights as we do for LED lights, the plan is eventually all these lights will be converted. All lights will get converted eventually as they burn out. HPS lights do last a substantial long time. So by putting this multiplier on, it helps you to get to this technology, get to the savings prior to waiting to end of life. And once everything is there, every number that attaches based on the cost for maintenance and replacement is tied to an LED light. Then that will more or less become the rate for LED lights. It's a bit of a crossover going on right now, and that's why the multiplier is there, because we can't just charge people with HPS lights the cost to convert these lights ahead of time. Eventually, as they fail and everything else, they will get one by one replaced, but that could take 20-some years. Now, I think I must state that this is one-to-one, it's as is. So there's a 100-watt light there, we'll put up 41. We can't add light to it. We can't add light over here for that cost. We can't move lights at that cost. It's as it sits. Now, that said, if the city had a place where they said, well, you know, this has been like this for a long time, the roadways change, you probably should do a light study on that just to make sure we maintain the light levels. That would be a cost to the city. Now, if it proved that we had to go from the 41 watt up to 150 watt LED, that would still be covered under this multiplier, as long as we stay within 100 to 250, and then the equivalent LED. But all of a sudden we had to go up to the 400 watt LED equivalent, then that would be a separate project, because it doesn't fall within the 100 to 250 watt HPS equivalent. Does that make sense? Any questions on that?
Councilor Thorson, then yours.
Sure. Thanks. I think, like, as far as I can see, everything sounds great, but there's the two big questions that I have that I think just need to be fleshed out, and that's, what is the, you know, if the city's making a budget this year, what is our capital requirements, if any, or what's our payback for us doing this? It's more so what's the payback is, what's the change for us, and does it make financial sense? Because it sounds like you're telling me it does, but I just can't see it.
So if the city said, okay, we want to convert all of this.
Yeah.
And we added $32 per light onto your bill, less your savings, the city would see your bill drop by roughly $11,000.
So our biggest savings on power consumption.
It's the power consumption is where the savings are.
Okay, got it.
Because you're going like, you know, literally to go from 100 watt to a 41 watt,
Yep.
I'm showing you're saving only $1. But you gotta remember, I've added $32 into that to help pay for that capital cost. Now, if you were to just do it wholesale, saying that we're not gonna do this multiplier, we just want to change it, we would charge you roughly $1.3 million to do that.
So there is no initial investment, it's all into the multiplier.
It's all based on the multiplier.
And I just wanted to clarify really quickly. So basically what I'm understanding is the rate gets built based on your guys' capital cost. The rate will change by $32 because of that, but then there will be a savings of, let's say, $31, so it's an immediate impact if you were to convert it all tomorrow, a savings of $11,000 per year for me.
3 years in the city, yeah. And once the multiplier is gone, once everything is all changed over, then that multiplier would be gone, and the rate would be what the rate is. And the same, now this multiplier will be looked at yearly based on costs. And again, what the people, or finance people in Edmonton did was took a average cost, because you gotta remember we're dealing with 3 different lights here, and I know they cost different, but what we've done is blanket them into one just to make this a simpler process. But again, we only use our standard light, which is 100 to 250 watt equivalent. If you wanted to wholesale the 400 watt ones, which, look here, the city has 82 400 watt lights. The cost savings, based on the same calculation we did here without the multiplier, because it doesn't apply the multiplier, it's another $7,000 a year.
Sorry, and what was the cap on the multiplier?
There is no cap on the multiplier.
So you said that changes.
Multiplier will be reviewed yearly. Okay?
So it could turn out next year to not be
It could
more
go,
benefit?
it could go a little higher, it could go a little lower.
Right.
Corey, did Sean mention it was about 80, like once we got rid of that multiplier, there would be an additional 80,000?
Well, if you take your number of lights times $32, it's roughly a little over, it's about $88,000 a year. Is what the multiplier is. And so once the multiplier is gone,
Then that's,
you'll see that much. Now that said, the rate might adjust a little bit. I can't tell what that'll be. Rates are reviewed annually, and it's all based on past year's costs. And things, you know, rates go up, rates go down.
So back to Jonathan's question, Barry, if I might, is that, so 2 parts, I was trying to still calculate that return on capital investment, because, so what I'm hearing, I guess, is your return is the multiplier piece, which is going to be in there, plus the fact that, you know, it's two-thirds less power that you have available to sell elsewhere at whatever cost. So that's where you return on the capital, because those lights are not going to use, what do you say, a third of the power that the other lights are using?
Yeah, well, it depends on the wattage like that. Again, Atco is a retailer, we're not. Atco Electric is a retailer.
Yeah.
So I mean, Atco Electric, or Atco retail would have to see where they'd sell their power, but as far as our operational stuff, that's what our rate is. So if our operational costs go down, which we anticipate they will,
Yeah.
That's where we'll see the savings, and we say to the people who do the rates, well, this is our cost, and we can adjust the distribution charge of that rate. The energy cost is not up to us. But again, you guys are locked in at 5.8 right now. That's where you guys are seeing substantial savings. Other areas that are different rates, they may benefit better, or may not benefit as much.
Councilor Baker, any question?
Thank you, Roger. Just a question. We're talking, when we talk capital, we're talking bulbs only?
What it is, the whole head gets changed, and because there's electronic
Whatever
guards
you
and
put
stuff
up
like that.
there.
Yeah, instead of the heads that we see now, which we call overheads,
Okay.
you'll see, if you go around Circle Drive, that's when you'll see the heads are just like that.
A different light bulb than head up or.
It's an LED
Okay.
lights.
When it comes to the poles and wire and other infrastructure, is there any change in that?
No, everything that's there will feed it. In fact, the power's going down, right? Like the consumption levels.
As far as
going down.
capital equipment,
Your only lights are invested, anything that we have to do on those lights, already, like one gets knocked over, the city does not pay a bill
oh,
for it.
yeah, I understand the rec, but when we're talking right now in this proposal, it's just the head.
We're changing the head, yeah.
Yeah, and
As
the
far
poles and
as
everything stay the same.
everything stays the same, everything
You
is-
know, I'm asking, they're falling down in Edmonton. They're rusting out and falling down. So if that happens, that's under the old program.
So if anything happens to your lights, because they're all invested, ATCO replaces those. We actually have a program
Yeah.
that tests data every, 7 years, I believe it is. So every 7 years, we actually go around to all our lights
Okay,
and we test them.
but that's still covered.
That's all that.
Okay,
So really, when you're talking capital, there is no capital out here. This program is so you guys can take advantage of the new technology now, prior to end of life, with no capital contribution.
Go ahead, Councilor.
Could you repeat, Kevin, you also mentioned about the, with the 400 watt? There's
So-
some savings on that?
So the 400 watt again will go down to, and I'm going to use 250 watt as the equivalent, because we don't stock it right now, it isn't a standard for us, but it'll definitely drop. So I use 250, so instead of a 400 watt high pressure sodium, I assume we drop it down to a 250 watt LED.
Okay.
Using the same calculation that we use to get these numbers,
Yep.
that's a savings of $7,000 a year.
Right.
Now, the multiplier, that change out can't have the multiplier applied to it. It wasn't approved through the EUC, so that would be a capital cost per light. Now, what we use to determine this for the up to 250 watt, the average cost to replace those lights, and this is where I got that 1.3 million from, is about $480 a light. Now I know the ones that would replace the 400 watt, the material cost is substantially higher. So it's something we can look at after if the city wanted to do the wholesale change there as well. But again, that would not be part of this multiplier, it would be an actual capital cost for those 400 watt. And then you could do your math with the savings of $7,000.
No, just to clarify, I was a little confused as to who was paying the upfront, but this is a true utility model where utilities are being provided to us. So then, any utility model, you have all the capital and operating costs that really determine what the price is that you can charge, and that's approved by the Alberta Utilities Commission with a certain amount of percentage profit that's just built into it, and that's just how it works. The city was thinking about doing something awfully similar with that EPCOR deal, where the city would have gone in and there would have been all the capital requirements and all the returns on investment that would have happened. It's the exact same. Only difference is there's an existing utility and you're simply providing the service, and we have the option of accepting a higher level of service, or perceived higher level. I think it would be that because you're, doing the green thing and using less kilowatts. And we're also getting a cost savings by doing it, is the way I understand it.
And the facilities are there already, right? You're not buying new facilities. What you're doing is paying a bit of a premium to get this savings ahead of end of life. I mean, if you said we're not doing this in end of life, then we'll replace every light in the city as they fail. But again, we won't see those savings until the lights get changed out.
Perry, what would the time frame be that's being proposed with what you're talking about? What kind of time frame would it take if the city in a couple weeks agreed at city council that this is where we wanted to go. What kind of time frame are you proposing to change out 2,500 lights?
Yeah, it's roughly 2,500 lights. I know with City Smart, when we did the pilot, the guys changed about 10 lights a day. Now, that said, they pretty well rewired every one of those lights. This is just changing heads. You know, we're not totally sure exactly how long it's going to take them. Again, if the lights are closer together, they're going to change more per day. But as far as the time frame, we would think they would get it done within the end of the year. So as it sits right now, we've just done this presentation to 4 municipalities in the province. You guys are one of the first ones we've done prior. Now we're doing it again in these chambers. A few other areas, a few other municipalities in the Lloyd district have seen this. And the advantage you guys have is all your lights are invested. You gotta remember, this just only applies to the invested lights. So that's the advantage you guys have, is you can't say, well, you know, is that light covered? Because I don't know if you know, there's some lights can be invested and the next one decided to not be invested. So that's where you have the problem with that.
The other question is, ATCO does serve the city, but it doesn't serve the entire city streetlights, do they?
Say again?
Are all streetlights in the city ATCO served, or?
Only the ones within the franchise.
Yeah, so what would that percentage be approximately based on the cities? Would it be 65%, 50%?
That's a good question. I believe we serve about 60% of the city, maybe a little more. Maybe a little higher than that. Yeah, I don't know how many lights Power has, but
And I don't know if we have that number right off the top either, so I thought I'd quiz you on that one. Thank you. Okay.
so just remember, the lights that I've shown on the presentation are strictly the ones that are HPS right now.
Okay.
100 watt, 150, and 250. The 400 watts aren't included in that number, and the ones that have already been converted over to Watch Park have been taken out of this number.
Just a quick question out of curiosity. Where are these 400s at? What are they used for?
400s, I believe, are mostly Highway 16. Would be my guess. Aaron.
I have one question for the city manager, right? Or, sorry, go ahead.
Just to be clear, so are we going to be replacing these as they burn out, or are there going to be?
No, it would be a wholesale. We create a program, a project for it, and you see our trucks out, and we'd be changing the lights, banging mags. If it was as they burn out, then
With 20 years, yeah.
we wouldn't need this multiplier.
For sure.
Question for city manager. Check, I'm not sure if you know this one off the bat. Do we have the ability to conduct a light study ourselves? Do we have the resources and technical people to conduct a light study that ATCO's offered to do, but at a fee? Do we have that technology at our, to do that?
See, for the most part, you'd only have to do this in the roadways that have changed. I mean, the only reason I'm saying this, you know, is when we did the pilot, that's where it was a certain road type many, many years ago. And of course, as the city grew, that changed. So that's how we identified, okay, we need a higher level here. I don't know where else, maybe 36th Street North would be an issue.
City manager?
Thank you, Mayor. Just talking to Terry, looking at Terry, he gave me the head nod that we do not have that capacity. So.
Okay. One of the areas of concern why I asked that is in some of our residential areas certainly have a great deal of trees, whereas other parts of the city are not well treated like some downtown. And my concern would be if we have currently a 100-watt light, high pressure sodium radar there, and the residents, we went to a 40-watt or 42-watt LED, the residents will notice a little bit of a difference. And once we install it, people are going to come back and say, boy, I wish we'd have a little bit more light. And I understand the 100-watt to 250. I'm wondering how we can work through that without going, if we do initiate a program like this, that we have some of those challenges, because in some of the neighborhoods, and there's not a pile, but we certainly know the downtown core where there's trees in some neighborhoods, they may do some light diffraction in the summertime especially. And how
Right, I'm not a lighting designer, but I know enough to be dangerous. So just putting more wattage on it doesn't necessarily accomplish what I think you're trying to do.
Okay. Okay. I see what
I
you're
mean,
saying.
you can do it, but, you know, if you need light farther down the road, that bulb isn't going to get it there.
Okay.
I know when we did the pilot, Twitter and Facebook were saying, well, why don't they give more lights on my street? And, you know, I can see that happening.
Yeah.
And it's something we can address then. And again, whether it'd be a different project, and again, we can't add light or move lights on this one. But we're willing to work with you guys if you guys want to change some lighting in other areas.
I was gonna say, it seems like a win-win in terms of us or down the road having, I guess, you know, high level quality lighting, and eventually once the cost of the install is done through the multiplier, that we really reap the savings and come out as a, I guess, a green community. What's been the response with other communities and concerns? I'm trying to wrap my head around this because I think it's a pretty good deal. Thank you very much.
Well,
What are some of the other barriers that other communities have seen?
so the other places are seeing the barriers where the lights aren't all invested. Because when you want to invest the rate is substantially higher.
Okay.
So when you're not invested, if the light gets knocked over, you pay the whole capital cost to replace it. That's the reason why the rate's higher. The city converted all theirs to invested, how many years ago? 6 or 7 years ago, Dave worked with the city, and the city went to all invested. The rationale there was, you can budget operating costs. We can't budget because we have to replace 20 lights at whatever cost that was. And a lot of the communities have a mixture of almost like some of them are half and half. So they're struggling with the increase in operating costs. You know, they have to do that math as well, where with you guys, it's strictly energy savings because you guys are already at that certain rate.
Councilor Thorson.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, my only comment on the the invested versus not invested, I think Lloydminster still has a similar problem in that if you drive past the border markers, there's going to be totally different sets of lights, possibly. Like, one side of the city is darker than the other, like because Saskatchewan won't have the same program necessarily. So we may be sitting in a situation where we have a totally different standard for one side of the border versus the other, and we all know that that's not ideal.
So I guess the fortunate part of that is along Highway 17, we serve both sides, so that would be an issue there. The boundary is, and I'm going to just off the cuff here, is I believe about a block into the east of Highway 17, north to 29th, and then we go over a few more blocks, and then we go north past the hospital. The hospital is on Saskpower. We serve the building on the other side of the road. We have all the lights along Highway 16, along the whole city, until 40th. We do not serve the Husky building or any of those facilities on that side, but we have the lights on the south side of Highway 16 till we hit 40th. Then we are on the west side of 40th, so that's power is on the east side of 40th. So we do have a substantially larger area.
Okay.
But all the lights within the franchise boundary would be affected with this.
Us Saskatchewan councillors take offense to your dark side. Just so you know.
It just seemed, that's what he was saying. So, Gary, is that what you meant?
The two of us that live in Saskatchewan are not always in the dark.
Good point, Councilor.
Alas.
Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Worship. When we looked at this before and you read through the stuff, even if this thing's a push or a break even, it's a good move because there may be a cap of 6.8 cents. In 2020, did you say?
2021 May.
2021. That's tomorrow. We all know what happened to natural gas a few years ago. It went up to $8 and $10 a gigajoule, and now it's about $2.91 today. So you can see what's happened. And our city got trapped in the natural gas program, big time. Can't remember the number, but I don't want to remember. It was ridiculous. So if we make this move, but we need to get a spreadsheet figured out, put together so we can really understand the detail. I think we should be looking at more than what we're going to do if possible. For this reason, because the more we can get into the lead And on the personal side of life, today I changed 2 floodlights in my house. I went from 150 to 41 watts. Or 40, I don't know, one board, and I don't know anything about power, but it's 12 watts, and it's brighter than the 150s, the old floodlights.
It'll definitely look brighter, like I'm not, you gotta get into the lumens and everything else can, but that's where a lot of people say, well, LED are brighter. So when we're going up to 41 watt, we're enhancing the light level, again, it's the coloring and everything else. The light is close to the same, a little bit better, okay? But that's one thing, when you convert to LED, it looks brighter, just because of the color of the light.
Well, whatever you do,
But it works, yeah, exactly.
but I think it's important for the price of power, because that's the big cost down the road. Is where's power gonna go? We all listen to the news, and we talk about getting rid of coal generation, God knows what. So what are we gonna have 5 or 10 years from now? And what's the price gonna be?
I can't predict that, Ken, but
No, but
I'm
neither can I.
kind of with you.
I have a good idea.
Yeah.
So I think it's at a break even, at worst. I'm not sure to tell you that. At break even at worst isn't a bad deal if it can save down the road.
Well, if the price goes up, it's definitely more savings.
Yeah.
Councilor Torsten, you have
He made my point.
made your point.
I don't want to think aesthetic wise, whether or not it's a different color across the street is a huge deal. The cost savings, I think, is what we need to be looking at, and hopefully SAS Power will follow suit in the future. I mean, we just have to take advantage of this opportunity. In my opinion. Even though I live in the
Dark side.
That's
what Mike said.
Well, that's a very inferred.
Thanks.
It was a good presentation, thank you.
Any other questions?
So, yeah, I guess what's the next step? And I guess in part our administration, I don't know if they had the opportunity to look through this before at all, or.
Yeah, we've done it before with them. Actually gave me on the letter, conversion letter. And the conversion letter, if you guys want to look at it, explains those numbers in a little more detail, because it's rather involved, how they come up with all the numbers. And then also with the letter, there's a summary of all your lights, as we have right now. Now, part of the question I had with Edmonton is, okay, so the city goes ahead with this, so by the time we get there, you know, and forbid 4 lights get knocked out, we'll replace those lights like we normally would if nothing was in place. Now, the problem that I thought would be sending this to the ABC, because we were signing off on this document. And what they've told me is, when we finalize everything, that's what gets sent into the ABC. So if there's 3 extra lights or 3 less lights, that's not going to have any effect on doing an approval or anything else.
So, Your Worship, is our recommendation to bring this to our next council meeting, is that required here? Or a bylaw or a motion, I'm not sure.
I think a recommendation with,
Thank you, Your Worship. That would be our goal, we bring it to the future council meeting, probably the 29th.
I knew that, and that this be brought forward to our next regular council meeting.
Seconder, Councilor Feldman. Any further comments or questions? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Barry.
Okay, if you guys have any questions, we'll phone call away.
Yeah.
One other thing I'll ask real quick, I know we've done the franchise renewal presentation last year, and he said if you guys move forward beyond, has all the documents, and if you guys have any questions on that, I'm more than happy to speak with you guys again. Whatever you need information.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the presentation. We will be in touch.
All right, thanks a lot.
Yeah, just a note on the front end, the franchise here is, we need to get, well, we'd like to get the process moving. I believe it's expired, correct, at the end of December?
Well, yeah,
That's
that's
a 1 year.
If the franchise agreement is expired with 1 year day-to-day status quo, if it falls after a year of expiration, then there is a 50%, I don't have to say penalty, but as far as the fees that we collect, they're collected by half. So January 1st, 2019, if nothing is done, then the city will see half of their fees.
We'll be bringing that. I'm sure we'll be coming to council.
Yeah, we'll bring that forward. The council was good with the presentation. I wasn't around when that happened, but it's about a guessing 60 to 90-day process from start to finish in terms of you have to advertise, you have to.
Yeah, there's some time limits which you have that document there, Dion. The good thing is the template for the franchise renewal has been revamped about 5 years ago. It's been approved by the AUC, it's used by all the other utilities. So it's more or less not a big onerous process anymore like it used to be. The AUC said you have this in here, this in here, this in here. It's just a matter of rubber stamping almost going forward. So it used to be a substantial beast and now it's not that big a deal anymore.
Excellent.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Moving on to item number 5 on the agenda is administration presentations. And I see 5.1 is the North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance and Partners for Saskatchewan River Basin membership. I'll up to the city manager through the city clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. This item is to provide the committee with information on the North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance and Partners for the Saskatchewan River Basin for your review and direction. The North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance has sent a letter to the city requesting support in the 2018 year through a membership contribution of 50 cents per capita. The North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance works to protect and improve water quality, water quantity, and the health of North Saskatchewan river watershed through sharing knowledge, facilitating partnerships, and collaborative planning. Partners for the Saskatchewan River Basin promotes stewardship and sustainability of the Saskatchewan River Basin stretching over 3 prairie provinces and a portion of Montana. The basin includes North Saskatchewan, Red Deer, Old Man, Bow, Highwood, South Saskatchewan, Battle, Saskatchewan, St. Mary, and Carrot Rivers. Both groups focus on sustainability of the environment and lead to increased understanding of the commitment to the waters and related resources of the watershed and the basins, and these members also provide a potential advocacy on behalf of the city. The options for the council today is that the committee direct administration bring an item forward to council for decision proceeding with membership in these organizations. That the council direct administration bring back further information, or that the committee receive a report as information. The budget implications for this item is the North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance membership is based on per capita basis, which is calculated at $9,870 for the 2018 year, and partnerships for the Saskatchewan River Basin membership is $2,000 per year for municipalities with populations between 25,000 and 199,000.
Thank you, city clerk. Questions or comments? Councilor.
Thank you, Worship. So just a couple of points I wanted to make sure we're all clear on as I review this. First off, a $12,000 unbudgeted item, if we were to go ahead with it, correct?
It is an unbudgeted item.
And not a partnership that we currently have.
No, we do not currently belong to either one of these organizations.
And the one thing I didn't know is this a first time ask, or has this particular ask happened in years previous?
I couldn't answer that question. I believe it was.
Yes, Maker, yeah, I was going to look to that to see if there's some direction for you.
I think it was a number of years ago, but we'd have to check the file.
I can answer
City
for a
manager?
community down the road has been a member for at least the last, I want to say 5 to 7 years for sure. And which I'm assuming the city of Lloydminster would have received the same documentation.
Councilor Torson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't want to sound selfish, but other than advocacy, what do we get out of it? Like if they could potentially advocate for us, because that's what I kind of read as one of the things. Like what do we get out of a membership? Is there any kind of insurance type of things that come with it? Or, you know, I know different associations you get deals, perks on different things. Do we know if there's anything out of these memberships that could potentially be additional value?
Well, I can speak to the Partners for Saskatchewan River Basin point to a network of organizations on focused stewardship and sustainability of the environment and a market to promote your project or initiatives with a broader audience, extend your contact beyond regional and provincial boundaries, highlight information in your organization initiatives that may be of interest to other partner organizations, participate in communities, and contribute to organizations that lead to results intangible education, information, stewardship action. And the Watershed Alliance work to do safe, secure drinking water supply, healthy aquatic ecosystems, and reliable quality water for supplies for sustainable economies.
Thank you. So I have a follow-up question, and it's based on the city of Lloydminster's circumstances right now. I don't know if things change in a few months and we start building a wastewater treatment plant that meets all of the mandated standards. I think this might be a discussion to have then, but as we have seen in reports that we don't always meet all of our standards, there's some kind of hypocritical nature to it, to being a part of this group, while we also are not meeting mandated standards of the water that we're putting back into the North Saskatchewan. So I just think that it might be, and maybe I'm off base saying that, but I just think that, yeah, it's a little awkward to say, yeah, we're fully in support of everything that you guys are doing, even though in reality we can't quite meet the standards that are mandated by government right now. Thanks.
Councillor.
Well, I appreciate the comment, but I think that comment could be used as an argument for why you should be in there and to lobby the government to give you the money. My bigger question, I guess, is that when you get involved with advocacy groups, one is sort of what have they done in the past, and what have they done for other communities, and what accomplishments do they have? I mean, this isn't an awful lot of money, and so I'm kind of wondering what they do, because the budgets they have can't be more than, what, $500,000, maybe $1 million, and you really can't do a heck of a lot, and really they're advocating for the standards that are set in place already by the federal government and provincial governments. So I'm trying to see what they're doing relative to those standards. If they, advocate to change the standards, do they advocate to do other things, or do they actually look for communities to see that are violating these agreements? I'm just sort of trying to sort that out, because certainly I don't want our city to be involved in hunting down other organizations, and maybe polluting the river. That's not our role to do that. There's certainly other agencies responsible for that. On the other hand, though, I think it's important to understand that the watershed is a watershed, which means it's a system and a network. And if there are things that we can do and advocate at a broader scale that would influence government policy, I think the potential exists around that area. I mean, there's heavy metals we shouldn't be eating the fish out of the North Saskatchewan River. We're quite a ways down, and there's people beyond us who have our contributions, so to speak, down there. But I'd like to have a better idea of sort of what they've done in the past, what those accomplishments are, and what the funds would be used for.
Councillor.
I read this a few times this weekend, and I share a lot of the same questions. At this point, do I have the information that I would want to say, yes, bring this forward to a council meeting for a decision? And the answer to that, to me, is no, that I want more. But the other thing is that, we just came out of, what I would say is a fairly tough budget. We talked a lot about nice to haves and want to haves and need to haves. And I can't get my head around the need to have this at this particular juncture. I'm not saying that there might not be something that could sway my opinion if more information is brought back, but I haven't got my head around investing in this at this point.
I think Councillor Baker,
Thank you, Richard. Going back, and I'm trying to remember the history on this, but I think we have to go with something like number 2, because I don't think we have any information here. This doesn't tell us anything. Really, I mean, it just says who is this outfit, and what are they doing, and what are the deliverables, and what's happening out there. For those that know about the Saskatchewan Watershed Authority, they did the similar work all over the province. And there's about 7 or 9 zones, and it was done with professional help all over the province, and it went on for 3 years. And there's a book out about the whole province, and it was, the runoff from the agriculture, and all these things were dealt with. So I think what we really have to know is, what is this really all about? And where does this money all over Western Canada and Montana go? And who gets it, and what for, and what do they deliver? And I just don't think we're there. But, in going back to the beginning, that river out there is our only source of water. And somehow, if we can make it work, we should be at the table. I think it's extremely important. And in terms of the wastewater treatment plant, I don't apologize for that as a member of council or a member of this community. That plant did meet the standards. And if they decide to change standards, I don't have to go any further, and it's going to cost you $50, $60, $70, $80 million. It's different if the plant just wore out and wasn't delivering the wastewater, unless we're missing some information back to the river the way it should be. And so I think that there's a combination of things out there right now that are unknown.
Councilor Forrest.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is actually similar to, or an add-on to Ken's point, is the fact that they changed the standards. Some of that is because of, environmental stewardship, but some of it comes from lobbying efforts from some of the companies that fund this group. So I'm kind of curious as to what this group does as well. Is this really a group that helps enhance and change the standards to bring them up so that we run into situations like the city of Lloyd is in right now? As far as disposal standards, especially when you look at FCOR, I've seen specific documents where they lobby governments trying to get them to increase standards because it's a good business development opportunity.
Councilor Fenton, do you have comments?
Yeah, you bet. I think that there's, I believe the river is a great asset to our community. And we have to take a look at it from them. I realize that it's unbudgeted, and it might not be for this year, but I think that it's something that we should probably be taking a look at in the future once we find out a little bit more. I did do some reading, and I realized with the Chamber of Commerce, we had asked the city for many years to take a look at the alliance. We thought it was a good idea to join. So I think that with the importance we take a look at using water for sending it out to other areas of the province, that we should have probably a little bit of a vested interest in that, and it's fairly minimal when you take a look at it in the big picture. So just something to think about, something that we find very important. Why wouldn't we be vested in it, and maybe not this year?
As for that, I just checked on the phone and Googled it, and they're involved in a number of, they have actually Northwest Watershed Restoration Projects, so they're engaged in a number of projects around protecting shoreline where it's eroded and settling in place so that you're not getting silt, banks getting washed away, and a number of other pieces in there that are around, particularly around high levels of use, if you like. So I don't dispute that, and I think there's merit in some of those, but I guess the question is, I just want to know a little more.
Councilor Forrest.
Just to bring it all back, thank you. I just wanted to say, I think this is maybe a good thing that we could do if we look at it once we have a wastewater treatment plant plan moving ahead and we've got funding from the governments and everything's going to be groovy. Then we can say, yeah, we have a vested interest in keeping this river clean, because otherwise it comes off.
I'll throw my 2 bits in because I agree with Councilor Baker. And we've all, I think there's been good points made. I think the important thing to remember is A, the North Saskatchewan River on one side is our source of drinking water, and B, we contribute to the North Saskatchewan River on the backside. So we hope the people above us are doing their share to the water that's entering the river and anything that happens. And we should take a little bit of responsibility for what we're entering into the river, because there's cities below us that also use that river for drinking water. So puts us in a difficult spot, and I think that we've discussed that it's unbudgeted, and it's not here to make that decision, but I think that the sense I'm getting, and I'll look to council for direction, but I think having some more information come back about each of the organizations, I see be it their annual report and possibly their financial statements, so we know what their goals are clearly and are identifying that that's where we want to be. So I think it's an area of interest for all of us. It's just a matter of, is there enough value in the interest? And I think
could presentation be worthwhile, or more just documentation? What would council prefer? I'm sure they would do a presentation if asked.
I think both.
Yeah, I think that both organizations, because certainly we play being right in the middle, we play both sides of the line, if I can use that terminology. And it's important to know what's coming to us for our drinking water, because it affects us on one side. And Councilor Torres mentioned, I go the other. I was thinking the other side. If we were belonging to the association, and those people that were members of the association below us realized what was going on here in full retrospect, how much more pressure would be applied. Because if I was a resident in any of the communities downstream of us, I'd be jumping on it, and I'd be contacting my MP and my MLA and saying, why isn't that being fixed? So playing that the devil's advocate on the other side. But I think if there's the possibility to bring each back with a presentation from their organizations and some information, be it annual reports and things like that, just to give us an idea of where that money is being directed, because it always comes back to, at the end of the day, it's about money. One's significantly higher than the other, and when I read the Saskatchewan portion, it covers off many of the water streams, whereas the, if I got this right, the North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance has a larger value, but it's mainly directed in the province of Alberta.
Just for the record, Your Worship, I don't know what it would cost. This is just the entry fee. These meetings are scattered all over the place, and you gotta travel to them, and there might be another $6,000-8,000 a year. So if you said it, you're looking at a $20,000.
$20,000 commitment, very likely.
15,
As well
pick a
as
number, but
someone from this side of the table.
let's not kid ourselves, it's just the administrative costs and everything else. It's all a cost.
It's cost. Absolutely.
Yeah, I believe there's quarterly meetings, plus an AGM is what the mandate is, and I think they're normally Mayorville, Two Hills, that area, so you're right, some cost.
I was going to add to, I mean, I think maybe it's a little cynical in this, but I've seen too many examples of other sort of green organizations that are funded by people whose interests are really to protect their financial stake that they have in a particular marketplace, and use the green movement to protect it. And I'm not assuming this is it, but in reading it, I want to know who's all in, who's the member, where's the money coming from, what's the goals, and what have they done in the past year to demonstrate that it's something we can say we're proud to be a member of as a city, and your dollars are really making a difference.
That's it. I think it's a pretty fair seeing nods. I think that gives administration some information to look at. Excellent. All right, moving on to item 5.2, the Mosaic Canada mural. So this is
Turn it over to Joel for Parks and Recreation.
Good afternoon, Joel. Welcome to Joel.
Good afternoon. Mosaic Canada Murals approached the city of Lloydminster in November regarding the possibility of producing a community mosaic created to celebrate Canada's 150. The goal of this project is to create 150 murals across Canada that will help unify communities and celebrate their diversity. The community mural would reflect the image of a train car and then be attached to the Canada 150 train. With all the other Canadian murals, Canada 150 train will be available to view on the website, and they may also do a book or possible traveling exhibit. So the steps taken for murals, step one would be a conceptual design, which would be through a consultation process with the Canadian Music mural team. Step two, community painting event. So participants in the community would get together to help paint the mural on little separate boards. Step three, assembling the mural completed by the Mosaic and Canada mural team. Step four would be installing and inviting participants to a community event. The community responsibilities of the mural would be to organize the community workshops, install the completed murals, and upkeep the murals. There's two size options of the murals. There's an 8x8 foot community mural, which costs $12,500, which would include about 400 participants, and an 8x12 mural, which is about $15,000, which would be up to 600 participants. This is an unbudgeted item, and we'd like some feedback.
So, Joel, if I could, I think I like the idea of the project, and we have examples of murals in the community, one being the one up on Lakeland College on their rear entrance on the Bioaquatic Center on the north side, northwest side, this would be. So a couple questions. One, is there an opportunity for us to engage in corporate sponsorship around this in some way? It's an unbudgeted item. I guess the second question would be, is where do you anticipate this going?
Absolutely. Thank you through your worship to Councillor Dijic. So we could seek out sponsorship. That is something that is allowed. Other communities have tried to put a cost per tile.
Mm-hmm.
They've had little success doing it, but they have attempted it. The location we're still looking at, the Canada mural, the Canada 150 murals suggest an indoor location. Looking at the Service Sports Center, the Russ Robinson, the Park Center are three that have come to mind thus far, but we are still looking at that. We could go outdoors. This is the same group that did do the Buffaloes by Victory by Lakeland. They just suggest inside would be a little better for weathering.
There's that stairwell going up to the second floor at service on the right-hand side as you go up the stairs is just wide open. And I think there's been some suggestion of running a PowerPoint presentation on an ongoing flow. I think part of those discussions, but I mean, that certainly is open. Okay.
Other questions, Councilor Thorson?
Just a quick question, is it 8 by 12 feet or 8 by 12 meters? Just curious.
8 by 12 feet.
Okay.
Councilor?
Your Worship, some people in the room went through the Buffalo Twins, hanging the Buffalo Twins that are hanging on the west wall of the Lakeland College. And that's a big mural. And it's ceramic, I believe, or painted ceramic or whatever. But the concern by the experts was having it outside because of the maintenance. And they said it's only going to last so long, it's going to fall apart. I'm just telling you what it was 10 years ago, whatever Centennial was. But I know that city administration looked all over this city trying to find a place to put that big mural. And that's why it ended up outside, because nobody could find a wall big enough to hang it on because of the size of it. And I really worry about the long-term maintenance. And when you got to redo that thing, if you have to redo it, what are you going to cost to do that? So I wonder if anybody knows. But the word back then, it would cost a lot of money to fix that up. So it's just the way it was. So think about inside.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. But you got to find a spot because that's pretty big.
Councilor?
And safe inside, you know, putting it on the stairwell to serve the sports center, there's your maintenance problem, right? It's gonna get rubbed, it's gonna get scratched.
It's up high. They want to reach that.
Yeah, but there's no room for an 8 by 12 in there, is there?
You got to get it up where they can't get at it.
It's up pretty high. Like, you might reach the bottom of it, but you put it so it's over the lowest part of the stairwell.
Well, I see you're at.
Maybe I'm not remembering it accurately either, but it's a suggestion.
So, Joel, the cost of $12,500 estimate, is that the true estimate of everything in, or is that the additional costs that would be associated with the city if we were to move forward, saying of us installing it and maintaining it? The $12,500 is the community responsibility. So I'm just trying to understand, is that all costs in for $12,500 estimate, or is that get us started and then we still have the cost of organizing workshops, completing, installing the mural and upkeep?
Yeah, there would be some additional costs operating. So the installation would do, the city would do themselves. And then of course, organizing the event would be something that the city would have to organize as well.
Are there any other 150 grants that are available to apply? And I know it's kind of come and gone, whatever it is, but is there any other grants that might support this?
I haven't seen any grants that would support this. I do routinely check, so, but at this point I haven't seen any that would support something like this.
I'm sure they would have that in the documentation if it was available. It's Canada 150.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. It's just the key where to put that. Yeah.
we had, as a city, I can comment on this, I know there was applications put in at various times this last year in Canada 150 for various projects, and we were always, they were oversubscribed, I believe is the word they used, and there was more applications than that.
So what do you need today?
So for today, we had reviewed the request of administration to bring this project to the next council meeting. We'll provide some more details on location or for committee to receive this presentation as information only. So there are communities that are deciding to do this project. There's only a limited amount of space. And so that's where we need to know if we would like to go forward and prepare some information for council or to use this as information.
Councilor?
The one question, do you sell these squares?
Well, we could, Councilor, that's what they.
We can't do that?
We could, but there's been limited success for people buying the squares.
Because, you know, you're looking at $20,000 bill.
Well, hopefully not quite at 12.5, but
That's what I
15 at least, yeah, 15,000 when we're all done.
Well, if you're about 8 by 12, it's 15 right from the hop.
Yeah, if you go for the big one, it's 15 right off the hop, some added resources. The challenge we've got is that one of the things that we did celebrate Canada 150 in our community, but did we leave a legacy? And I think this is the intention of the Canada 150 mural, is to leave some sort of legacy in the city. Had we had more planning at the front end going into the 150, maybe we could have done something.
But there are other things we could do.
There are other things we could do. There's certainly lots of things we could do because we can, there's still time to.
There's some local artists that do pretty good work.
Can we print, the Buffalo Twins was printed for limited edition, like prints. Can we get prints made and sell them afterwards?
I could definitely find out that information and get back to you about that.
And I feel like if there's only 150 cities across Canada and they're going to make a book about it, it would be nice to be part of that. I understand it's an unbudgeted item, but in my opinion, I'd like to see further information for it where we could fit something like this within our city.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see a plan come back to, sorry.
It's okay.
No,
Finish.
No, I was going to say, if at our next meeting came back with a plan and said, these are some strategies that we would look at fundraising, prints, selling the tiles, and I appreciate you sharing it hasn't been very successful in other communities relative to sharing the tiles, but are there other creative places that, there are sources of funding? For me, I guess when I look at the 15,000, it doesn't seem like an awful lot. But if it's 15,000 here, the Northwest, watershed is another, whatever it is, 12,000, and the next one's 12,000, and all of a sudden we're up to 100, and then that adds up to 150 and 200, and they're all on budget. And so my concern is, I guess, that at the front end it would be important for us to be able to say, if we're going to take on these, unidentified costs, that we should have some strategy behind it to be able to say, how do we minimize that cost in such a way that it doesn't become just one more cost that really,
Yeah, so that's a great point. The other thing I was thinking, in terms of ideas, maybe we could approach the service clubs or something like that in town that might be interested in supporting something like that. But either way, I think the idea is worthy of at least coming to the next council meeting, not necessarily the next one. I don't know how the schedule lines up, but coming forward to a council meeting and we can make a firm decision then. But I think with the questions you have right now, I'd say there's enough that we could probably make a decision then once we get the additional information, in my opinion.
Councillor Fagan.
I'd like to consider still outside as well. You take a look at the Buffalo Twins. They've really weathered the storm very well out at Lakeland. They've been there for 10 years.
I'm not sure.
So, I know that they were doing, I remember Lakeland was doing a little bit of an upgrade on some of those, but the nice thing with outside is that you would have many more people that would see it. I see Bakerville, they did theirs on the ATV building outside. So I do think they do have a little, it would be nice just to consider.
Absolutely.
I guess the one I'd like to lead back to administration as well, lead charge with Joel, is challenge you to see if there's any cost savings that, the budget's there, that if you go back over your budget and say, hey, if we can trim this and trim that, and we can find that money within your own existing budget if that's possible. I know it's early in the year, but if there's an opportunity, that's something you felt maybe this was more pressing from the perspective, because I think that council agrees it's certainly worth examining. It's just a matter of if we could find the money within reason and go from there once the full package comes back, and if it's so decided. But if there's any possibility of finding even half of it in the budget that's existing in your department, that would be terrific to help lead our charge a little bit.
if 6 organizations paid $1,000 each, you're up to 6,000, you're well down that pathway, I think. And there are, I would think, at least a half a dozen organizations that could probably.
So, some food for thought. So I think that based on what you're hearing, we can certainly ask for council for the committee to review information, if that's what they so wish, to have administration bring back some information at a meeting, not necessarily the next council meeting, but at a council meeting in the future, sooner than later. Look for direction from council, if that's the wish.
I'll make that motion, what the mayor said. That Joel be instructed to provide a little more information about funding, details around funding strategies and opportunities to offset the initial costs. I think also we talked about location as part of that as well, and bring it back at not this meeting, but the subsequent meeting after that. I think what I also heard is that there's this little sense of urgency around time. So we're one of 100, 200, 300 in those communities that want to apply. So if we're going to do this, it needs to be done quickly. Otherwise, we'll be left standing outside of the room.
A seconder to the beginning of the motion. Councilman Monroe. Any further discussion? No, it's okay. A little clarification is always good. Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 5.3, 2018 Street Improvement Program. I'll look to the city manager.
Call order from engineering.
Nice jacket.
Good afternoon, Warren. Welcome.
Thank you, Worship, Councilors. Today I'm going to present upon the 2018 Street Improvement Program. It's a project being built on a yearly basis just to improve our transportation infrastructure as well as improving the overall quality of our road network. It's going to comprise of three main components: surface improvements, our concrete sidewalk improvements, as well as asphalt trails. Every year, the engineering team goes through a few resources to develop a list of locations that you see on the GBC report. Typically, we turn to our road survey assessment or road condition survey assessment, geotechnical survey, as well as collaboration with our transportation services department. This list is subject to change pending further survey and further estimation. The budget for this year is $4 million, which is $1 million more than last year. And currently, where we stand with the project is we're in the process of acquiring an engineering consultant for design as well as construction management. Okay. Yeah, so if you're looking at this diagram right now, that is the complete highlighted all the areas of the street improvement program. The list you see on the report is more so the higher prioritized areas, or the larger size areas we'll be tackling this week or intend to tackle.
So, Warren, if I can ask, does that include the sidewalks and the trails? Or
Yes.
It does, okay. So the request I would like to ask, if I kind of administration, is to come back with 3 separate maps with a different color on each regarding sidewalks, so the residents that have issues with sidewalks can say, oh, my sidewalk is being fixed, or no, my sidewalk isn't being fixed, and we'll certainly want to speak to potentially engineering and public works and so forth for the street work that's being proposed, as well as the paving of trails, just to give a little more clarity, because that's a great looking map because there's a lot of work being done, but I think it would help to let people know actually what is being done in the respective areas. In fact, that's just my take on it. Councilor?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, this is one of those areas where, we rely on the experts to tell us which ones need to be done, and we say, here's the budget, and right on, you do it. There's only one question I have, one that I don't see on there, and it's one that's it's actually a gravel kind of path. It's just north of 36th Street that connects to the street north of that. I was told by a resident who was asking me about it that they were under the assumption that that was to be paved at some point. It would be on the east side of the berm kind of thing and goes all the way back. And, 36th Street, College Drive. I should give you the other part of the intersection. Yeah. So anyways, there's a piece of pavement that's on the other side of the berm that goes all the way, and I don't see it on that map, but they were under the impression that it was being done in the near future. And I was just curious on that specific part, because it's gravel right now, it's not paved.
I'll look into that. Typically, our trails are, we turn to the Parks Department to get an idea for which trails they'd like to see upgraded. I don't think that concerns come to me directly, or I haven't seen that concern come to me directly.
And I haven't shared it up until now, so that's probably why. I was just curious when I saw it on the map.
Can they just point that out on the map?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure
Yeah,
out where.
sure, right there, yeah, north of 36th Street, and it connects just on the other side of the berm, and it's paved, or it's gravel, whereas all the other ones would be asphalt, basically, the city with the exception of that path, and maybe a handful of others.
So it's actually a path, Counselor? or-
Yeah, it's a path, it's a gravel path, it's not paved.
Okay.
I'll look into potentially adding that to our list of trails that we tackle this year.
Because if I could, I think there's also that path further down towards the end of that street, just behind Mr. Sparkle in there, going up the hill. I don't think that one's gravel as well in there.
No.
And I think it connects to another one on the east side of the street there too.
So is there something wrong with gravel?
No, we're just talking about asphalt lanes, so where's, are we, our intent, the goal to cover them all, some of them replace? And so we're identifying those that are gravel, and are they gonna be covered by asphalt? That's all.
Okay. So with this, the way we have it right now is, for the whole project, approximately 12% of our budget will be allocated towards trails. At this time, the locations we both mentioned aren't part of that list. If there is room, we'll definitely make the effort to try and add it to the list, but if it's gravel, I'd like to upgrade it to that.
I'm not advocating more, I'm just saying those are gravel as well. I guess my concern is that, the trails in Bud Miller are on a separate budget then, is that what I'm gathering?
So that's an interesting situation, just because sometimes what we encounter is parks will have requests, may not have the budget to add new trail or upgrade the trail from like the subgrade up. So they'll approach the engineering team to potentially tack it on as part of the asphalt trail improvement program. Because they know they have a budget for patching and smaller, improvements and just other patchwork. For us, we'll jump into the heavier fixes to these trails.
Because I know they've done some work on the trail, just sort of directly west of the pond where I think TELUS puts the tower during the mobile tower to offset the load on cells. But that trail then sort of winds south and around the bush around the back towards we store our mulch and whatever in there. But that road typically is flooded. And lately they put some really rough materials in there. So they're actually pieces of brick, rock, and some of them are pretty big. But it's I just wondered if that was ever going to get remediated, and I'm not sure it's fair to ask you that question here. But I mean that area typically gets flooded, so it's unusable. I know they sort of added material to it to boost it up, but it's still going to be underwater. And we typically get water coming in from the south along the bush on the south end of the park, and it literally flows over, and it's like you can hear the water running in the spring when it melts out from, and it comes across and actually washes out one of the trails. Like once it turns back into the bush, or else you can keep going further west along the trail. But those areas, again, they're used a lot, and I was wondering again, is the remediation perhaps of the elevation and water drainage is more important in my mind actually than the asphalt, because it's unusable and you can't get through there. And it's not there, that's what I'm asking.
It'll be something we'll have to look at in the future, not necessarily this year, but potentially as a project we'll take on in another trail improvement program. But Miller has been a tricky case, and we did do work on it last year. Hopefully we've been able to mitigate some of the flooding issues we might encounter in the springtime from last year's project. That'll be I'll have to get in touch with the Parks Department to work on it as well.
I'm not sure what the solution is beyond mine.
Councilor?
No, thank you, Worship. Just maybe a little bit off the exact layout. When we're contracting out these paving projects, if you go west of 62nd, north of the railroad tracks, a lot of that new road is like this. There's all kinds of those roads are settling really bad. Around the catch basins, speed bumps, and you name it. I believe there's, and I'm not an engineer, but there's some kind of compaction problems and some issues there, but a lot of those streets aren't very old, and they're falling apart. They're not going to last 30 years like most of them.
So I believe we have, it's not that way. 56th Street has been something we pinned, but not as a high priority at this time. 56th Street we know is kind of...
But I'm thinking about going forward.
Going forward, that'll have to be something we look at as well. It wasn't part of our high priority list this year. But in terms of the settlements, I can't speak to that at this time.
Councilor?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to be clear on another thing. If I remember correctly from the budget, there's other specific bits of roadway that are separate from this program as well, correct? Like 40th Avenue is a separate,
Yes.
It's not part of this program, it's just a separate project on its own?
Correct.
Okay. And there's a few other ones like that, correct?
We have 40th Ave, this is a big one. The street improvement program encompasses that whole list. And then the other one that's in my realm right now would be a traffic signal project that includes upgrades to traffic signals.
So, oh, sorry. Nope.
Just on the map, the green circles, what do those signify?
Those are intersection improvements we'll be looking to work on. So, for example, at 36 or
36 and 47 is that,
36
covered by
and-
Jack Next School?
Yep. We'll be looking to upgrade some of the lanes or just improving the overall quality of that intersection. I don't have details on it right now. That is things we're looking at, or we'll be looking at with the engineer that we end up procuring.
So, and it kind of relates to the downtown area development plan, but the part of it is that I think along 50th going north, and I don't know all the streets you have identified there, but if you go north, there you go, right there. One of the things, certainly in reading about area development plans, and they're talking about engineers build roads, but you involve people in the community that design it. And so one of the things that's been tossed out there is can the sidewalks be a little wider to allow opportunities for outdoor cafes or outdoor opportunities for people to do business on the sidewalk? And has there any thought given, because I mean you're pretty close to that zone, if you like, there where that kind of business might be contemplated, potential interest is there for that kind of thing, and so I don't know what that looked like, but does that mean when you do the road, do you replace the curb as well?
Depending on the stat or like the condition of that curb, we will change it out, replace like for like. Downtown is interesting in that I know it's not an official initiation or any kind of initiative right now, but one thing I am looking into are things called complete streets, where it does encompass things that you talked about, being able to have space for more pedestrians, wider sidewalks. It's one of these kind of projects that's kind of, I guess, sifting its way through the country, and it's kind of spreading as well. Complete streets is a concept I'll be looking into moving forward and as part of future programs.
Yeah, because they just add, what, about 8 to 10 inches on the sidewalk, which actually is quite significant when you look at the overall sidewalk, particularly down there. And there's the opportunity to provide businesses to do outdoor activities, even if it's just to put their produce out there or else start an outdoor cafe or something. But it just gives that extra little bit to make it something that could be contemplated. Yes, well, I'm glad you're keeping that in mind, and I think certainly that's an area that that consideration would be ideal for us.
Yeah, no, I thank you for that.
Any questions or comments?
Well, I guess before I go, if you were interested, the lights that were under SAS power jurisdiction, there's 328 100 watt lights, there's 49 150 watt lights.
You have the man.
That was 328 100 watt lights, 49 150 watt lights, and 26 400 watt lights. Total of 403 lights under SAS power. I would have told Perry that, but I got that email to him a bit too late, so.
Well, thank you very much, Warren.
Yeah, thank you.
You betcha.
Not so dark over there after all.
And especially in the engineering department, they're pretty bright.
So do we move this to bring this forward to our next council meeting?
No, I think this was issues information only. Thank you very much, Warren. Thank you for that presentation. I know people in the city will certainly appreciate knowing where their dollars are being spent and what we're going to be up to this coming year for repairs. Moving on to 5.4, 2018 Water and Sewer Main Replacement Program, another hot issue. So up to City Manager.
Craig will be presenting from engineering.
Welcome, Craig.
Good afternoon. So, the water sewer replacement program, it is an annual initiative that is undertaken by engineering to replace aged underground and surface infrastructure. We have sent out a request for a proposal to acquire the services of an engineering consultant to do the design and construction management on this project. So far, we have received 10 proposals, and we are now reviewing them. This year, for the 2018 water and sewer replacement program, we have selected to do 46th Street between 50 and 52 Avenue, and 50 Avenue between 44 to 46th Street. We have chosen this area with the assistance of the Water and Waste Services team. What we usually do is get a list from them for the problem areas that they usually have. So we get a list showing pipe breaks, the classification of these breaks, the location of these breaks, and areas where they have blockages or flooding. We also take into consideration the age of the pipe, which in this case, the water and sanitary pipes are around 70 years old. The material of the pipe, and then we take into consideration what the master plans say are the upgrades to these areas. So, for example, in this area, the water master plan has identified upgrades on 46th Street between 50 and 52 to upgrade from 150 millimeter pipe to a 200 millimeter pipe. And on 50 Avenue, it has identified that we need to create a loop from 44 to 46th Street. Now, the stormwater master plan has also identified that there is a risk of surface flooding in this area as well. The sanitary master plan, even though it didn't suggest an upgraded diameter of the pipes are quite old. They're 70 years old, so they are 20 years past the useful life. The budget for this is $3 million, which is more than what was budgeted last year. And to ensure that we complete construction, knowing that we may be adding a little bit more scope, what we have planned to do is start construction a bit earlier. So we're planning to start mid-May instead of mid to end of June. One other thing that we are planning to do is to add additional verbiage into our contracts to ensure that the contractors are compliant with the proposed end date. And another thing that we plan to do is we plan to work closely with the consultant that we are going to hire and to actively monitor the project schedule. And then we're going to be proactive in letting the contractor know when they're off schedule, and then we're going to monitor what they do to get back on track. This information is being brought as information. However, I would like to add that based on the proposals that we've received, we will be taking a request for a decision to the February 12th council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Greg. Any questions? Councilor Baker.
This is more of a, you look at 50th Avenue like a shutter when the street's going to be shut down for a long time. And you know what kind of traffic's on there now. And I guess I don't have to tell anybody, but we really need a work plan on how we're going to deal with the 50th Avenue intersections. We got to get them in and filled, and we don't have to do the whole block. We have to get those intersections done and get out of there because, and then the timing because of the fair and all this stuff. If 50th Avenue is shut down.
Yes, that's one of the plans we have.
I'm sure you do. But
yeah, when the contractor starts working on 50th Avenue, we're going to let them continue and finish everything, up to service everything before they move on to the next one.
you know, which street do you do first, but 50th Avenue is gonna be a tough one, I can tell you that.
Certainly is, and I think that's, no matter how we do this, it doesn't matter if we go with,
You just have to get in and out.
Yeah, absolutely. Counselor?
Thank you, Your Worship. This is kind of a technical question that I probably wouldn't understand the answer anyways, but 49th Ave, can that handle the load that 50th Ave normally does if that's the detour route, or are we just going to run into problems anyways I guess long-term, is this going to do potential damage? Because I know it's not so much how many vehicles go on a road in a day, it's more the weight of the vehicles going down a road on a day that has potential detrimental effects on the quality of the road and how quickly it breaks down. Do you know 49th Ave can handle the same load?
Well, in terms of traffic?
Yeah.
Well, that's something that we're going to have to take a close look at, but that is something that we are planning to direct traffic to around 50 Ave during that, along 49, and the other streets are around. We'll have signage up, and that's something we will determine when the traffic accommodation strategy is done.
I guess the question sort of relates to Warren, I guess, and the proposal here is that I know that one of the things we've seen in presentations at places like SUMA and other places, they talk about a sort of an asset management plan where we've logged into a master plan with the age of our pipes is and so on and so forth, where we can sequence out and see visually, I guess, where we're at. Are we any closer? Have we started that at all? Or because my understanding was it was going to be in the new Diamond software and with the capacity of adding a piece in there that we would do that. So I don't, if so, someone was just to ask your department today is that, can you map out the entire city and the age and replacement and the schedule? We have that.
Well, we know the age of the pipes. What we don't know is for example, the sanitary and the storm. We don't know the condition.
Okay.
That we're going to have to do camera video inspection of what it looks like. And for each water sewer that we do, we usually do a video inspection of the storm and the sanitary, just to see what condition it is in. And that will help us to determine if we can leave that for another year.
So as part of that process and as a follow-up, have we looked at all the pipes, or is this, because I knew we bought a camera, we still do some contract work around some of this as well, my understanding, but so where are we at in terms of seeing the entire city? Have we taken a look at the whole city, or are we just going along and identifying the older pipes?
Well, we haven't, as far as I know, we haven't taken a look at the whole city.
Okay.
But as I said before, each time we do.
All right.
Just to answer your question, Councilor Check. On the asset side of things,
yes,
we're just starting to ramp up on that side of it.
Good.
But that is our goal, very similar to what Greg's been bragging forward. You know, you're gonna have to go and put a condition on these things and look at them as a whole complete system. That's the next step in our asset.
So we have a target date. We say like in 2 or 3 years we'll have the whole city in, or do you have a timeline around that? Because I think again
Not as of yet. We've met a couple times as a committee, but we have not picked those dates as of today.
Okay.
But once we have that, we'll be coming back to council and getting that to them.
Okay. And the reason I asked that question is we've talked about having a 3-year budget.
Yes.
And
Oh, yeah.
so
That's a
I'm
key
going,
thing,
if
for
we're
sure.
going to do a 3-year budget, we need data that's good enough to support a 3-year budget too.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. Again, our master plans will tell us what we need to do with our existing system as per making sure it operates with the capacities that we've been seeing.
Yeah.
What you're talking about is the condition side of it, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Thank you, Craig. Any other questions? Councilor?
Thank you, Worship. You know, you look at this is basically an add-on to what was done last year, isn't it? Yes. It's just carried out because it was right here.
Yes.
Right? So it sucks to a point for all those people that are the businesses and everything around there, because we heard a lot about that. You know, as a carry-on, but it also makes total sense. So I just wanted to be clear that work, you see this line, it's right where it stopped this year, just to carry further to the west and the north or south now.
So what's happening is that we took the PVC up to the intersection of 50th and then there was another PVC at 52F. So in fact, we'll be replacing that cast iron that's in between where we stopped and what was done at the 52F.
Craig, one of the things that some larger cities have attempted is going to a 24-hour construction cycle. Is that something that is even entertainable by contractors to try and enhance, again, weather-driven? Anyone that's in the construction industry will tell you it's weather-driven, but do we look at something even for 44th section, saying that to try and enhance that, because we get good going, let's get going, that question, because I'm thinking both of the traffic flow and the construction. Is that something that would be possible? Certainly then it affects cost, I'm sure. I mean, that wasn't budgeted for that. But is that something that we could consider?
Yes, I think that's something we could definitely consider. And we could also consider working in off-peak hours doing that intersection, working at nights or on weekends.
Certainly, it was anything that would condense the construction cycle in that, especially on 40 or on 50th Ave. I think there's no question that every street's important, but being that 50th is Highway 17 and the activity there and being adjacent to 16, it's going to be fairly intense. And I think every business does understand it's no easy compensation for their business, because everybody depends on water and sewer. Their businesses wouldn't be there if they didn't have water and sewer either. So they understand that if we can condense at all as much within a month, if that was the case from the time we opened to the time we were able to recap with asphalt, I think that would sit a little better with the business people and the residents of the city, because it's going to affect everybody in the city that drives downtown. Councilor Mayor.
Your worship, you gotta watch what you're doing in the residential areas, 24-hour shifts, but people like to sleep, so you gotta be kind of careful. But on the downtown, I have a question through to Terry, if I may, only because he's got some history, a lot of history in the city. And we make reference to the computer solving our underground sewer and water problems. And I've had many engineers tell me, you still gotta get the camera out, see what's going on down there. Because soil conditions, different types of soil affect your pipe a different way, et cetera, et cetera. You still camera it regardless. The computer isn't going to solve the underground problem, is it?
No, for sure. All it does is the best guess based on the parameters that you feed it. No different than anything.
But this camera you just purchased here recently, that's what that was for, right?
Yes, the video camera, I'm not too sure what size it was that we just purchased, but I know we do have one that does our sewer services to the houses and the buildings and stuff like that. We have one smaller diameter, but I do believe we also have another one that's a little bit bigger.
Yeah, Dave,
you know, and that was the one that was just a little bigger, right?
Yeah, that's mainly for leads,
Yeah.
for catch basins and stuff. It's not an actual mainline camera.
There. So you got to get a pretty specialized camera equipment to be able to get in some of the larger diameter mains.
oh, for sure.
And we haven't got that in-house yet, so those
That'd
types of
be a good
services, we'd be looking more forward in the future.
It's not in the budget, Your Worship.
No. Thank you, Terry. Any other questions for Craig? Well, we'll look forward to having some more information come back to the February 12th meeting, which is excellent, and bring us up to speed on how and we're going to tackle this challenge, because I think many times it's right down the main throat of things in the city. Everybody's going to get excited, so thank you. Moving on to item 5.5, reconciliation court pit declaration. The city manager.
Dan from the Office of the City Clerk will be coming up.
Thank you. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Council. So before you today is a declaration from Reconciliation for Pit. Just for the record, I think the name is still being finalized. That's that little TRC there. I'm getting the head nod no now that that is finalized, so that is the name moving forward.
No, there's a new name.
Oh.
Yeah, it's Harder Treaty 6. Sorry.
Stand corrected. So basically, as you can already see, is I know some members of council have been involved with this group, so I think they're more experts than myself at this matter, but we wanted to bring this forward because administration has been following Truth and Reconciliation. We had the Office of the Treaty Commissioner come, so we brought this forward for the committee here for their recommendations of how to proceed.
I'll certainly pick this one up, I guess, Dan. Thank you very much for the introduction. Councillor Fagin, Councillor Dychuk, and I have been, over the past year, attending numerous meetings in the Office of the Treaty Commissioner of Saskatchewan that was organized, and they've been held at Onion Lake. They've been held here within the city. We've hosted a meeting, I believe. We've attended meetings at Lakeland College. Several organizations, including Indigenous representatives from Onion Lake, Little Pine, Poundmaker, as well as Frog Lake, have been involved in the discussions after a lot of the work that's occurred over the last couple of years through the Office of the Treaty Commissioner. There's 105 recommendations that came forward from that perspective, and part of that work is to identify making it simply a declaration to help people understand the awareness factor. So what there had been work done that's attached as the attachment. If you roll forward here about 3 pages, Wendy, if you could please, there's a commitment. It's called Reconciliation Fort Pitt in this case. Thank you. Reconciliation, it's now called the Heart of Treaty 6. There was some discussion around naming commitment to relationships and trust. And the intention is to have everyone come to the table to simply acknowledge what these 2 pages outline. There's, in many cases, it's some general statements. For many of us, it seems very, you might say, why are we doing this? For some cases, it dates back to residential school involvement, back to the treaties. There's a lot of history that I've had a real quick 1-year education on the treaties that were signed in our very area, Fort Pitt. And that being where Treaty 6 that covers all 3 provinces, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta, many First Nations. And this is where we've reached a point that we've been asked to consider this information. I'd ask Council to consider it, look at it. What the direction is that hopefully if Council is agreeable at a Council meeting to accept this document with the amendments as we've indicated on the name, to agree to be one of the signatories on this agreement at a time in the near future. There's talk of the end of March is what approximately the date that they're looking at. I won't go through the list of organizations. I won't speak for the other organizations in the city, but the schools have been involved, Lakeland College, the library, the Native Friendship Center, the what used to be Prairie North Health Region, now the Saskatchewan Health Authority has been involved. So there's numerous people, and this is one of the steps. The question the Council may ask, and I can answer ahead, is there a financial commitment at this time other than us attending these meetings and being involved? No, this, by signing this, in essence, a memorandum of understanding would be there's no financial commitment to our city. Are we committing to any particular item? No, it's a starting of a building block to build a relationship that's already there, but going to be a little more formalized, I think is the term I'd use. Certainly our council has been very, in the past, previous council have been involved, and we continued that with the Indigenous Business Summit, working with the Chamber of Commerce and First Nations. And we've done a lot of great things, but this is to help build on that, because this is something that's going on throughout Canada. And certainly the City of Saskatoon is undertaking this as the city themselves with First Nations. I understand Regina is doing the same. The area, Saskatoon, as I mentioned, and certainly because of the nature of where we sit, it involves 2 provinces again. It involves First Nations or Indigenous people on both sides of the border. And the intention is to help bring some awareness to this as part of this whole Office of the Treaty Commissioner and the Reconciliation and Truth work that was done over the last several years by the federal government. Certainly there's opportunities that will lead to enhance the hope of business relationships and growing the relationships business to business from First Nations to our community as well as surrounding areas. So there's some information for you. I certainly try and field some questions, and I'd ask Councillor Dychuk and Councillor Fagin to step in too if they've got any input. I'll turn it over to you, Councillor Preston.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't have a question so much as a comment. I think it's important, I think it's meaningful, and we should bring it to council.
If I could just add a comment, I think, all the things I think the mayor said are accurate in terms of representation. I think the one word that comes to mind when we spent some time talking about is the whole notion of commitment. When you become a signatory to an agreement, you express commitment to want to be a partner. And that, at this point, this is a very high-level agreement. It's not pay to play. Nobody has to pay to come in and be part of it. And we had a bit of a discussion around that. It's you sign because you want to be part of the process. And it really is, in many ways, just that commitment to acknowledge that there's work to be done, and more than anything, acknowledge that this becomes, in essence, a vehicle for those discussions to occur, and anticipating that there will be other side discussions that will spin out and continue to work on. But it's really is a statement of our own agreement, if you like, to build upon and say we think it's important and we want to move it forward.
Any other comments? That's right.
I think for the most part it's okay, but within this document, I don't know what's transpired over the last year, but a lot of this is provincial and federal stuff in here.
Yeah.
Like, can we achieve or meet these goals?
Well, I was going to say that I think that there are a couple of things that there in SUMA as well as in Yuma, that many of the presentations are there around the work that's being done. And the reality is much like many of the other policies that come from the federal level, the rubber hits the road here. And they look at municipalities in terms to make them work. For instance, Lethbridge has relationships with Tutina and other reserves in that area, and they've established agreements to work together and partnerships. So it's, in many ways, it's an agreement to agree and begin working together. I think it's important to understand in many instances that there has been no agreement, there's been no working together, and as a result of the TRC Commission and the report by Justice Sinclair is saying, you know what, if we're going to move forward on this, then the people that are living it daily need to make a stand, they need to make a commitment, they need to begin living it on a daily basis. It's not entirely political document or political action. It's about people and how they treat each other on a daily basis. It looks a little different in Alberta than it is in Saskatchewan, and each province has the right to implement things as they see fit. And there are a lot of recommendations in there, and I think there's work probably for decades to come in terms of moving things forward. But I think there's some signals that we have, not signals, but realities, is probably a better way of positioning it in Saskatchewan. By 2020, half the students in the educational system are going to be the First Nations or Métis. And so there's really issues around, how Indigenous, non-Indigenous people treat each other, how do they get along. We see examples in the media of how there's prejudice, there's racism existing. And the reality is that in order for us to move forward, and I think as Premier Wallace suggested in his time, is we're all treaty people. And so we need to get by this, we need to find ways to work with each other, and not just on a daily basis, but economically in order for the province to succeed. And these are small steps. There's no commitment on our part to all of a sudden apportion a chunk of our budget forward, but it's about starting to build agreements about attitudes, acknowledging that wrongs have been done in the past, and that both parties, everybody who signs on has a role to play in terms of moving it forward and making change happen. That's it. Feds can change all the policies they want, but and the province can as well, but it's down right on the street where those things have to change.
I don't know if that answers your question, Councilor Baker, but you're right. Federally and provincially have all the financial obligations. This we do not see, and we've looked at this several times over.
I'm sure
we've talked about it, that there's not a financial obligation, but simply, from the perspective that common voices are heard. And again, as Councilor Gatchuk said, the rubber hits the road here because we deal with some of the challenges every day with organizations within our city and trying to build bridges rather than create walls. I think is the intention. I think it's a matter of giving an opportunity for people to communicate. Because it certainly helped me open a door with the Band Council at Onion Lake, and I think that as well as Palm Baker for Little Pine, because of business relationships that are starting to develop in our community with the casino, things like that. There's opportunities that will grow with this, and I think that this is one of many pieces to the puzzle, because this is a huge puzzle. This is a puzzle that goes back to 1776 or 1876, And, you know, I've learned, like I say, some of the discussions and things we've been through, and I'll encourage council to try and attend a couple of different things coming up in the month of February. We'll be talking about it next week at the council meeting. It's so important because there's a lot of history that I've learned that I didn't learn in high school and in elementary school about some of the things that we deal with today. And I think that helps put it into perspective. And I think we have an obligation to try and understand it, because things that went on in 1876 are going to be with us for an awful long time. And the sooner we understand that and start that communication and conversation, it will help hopefully heal a lot of wounds and help a better understanding for all parties involved. That's it.
I'll just add, we're the leaders and municipal leaders in this community. I think that's where it's incumbent upon us to signal that this is important. If no one says it's important, then it's not going to happen. And the other part I would say is that, you know, there was discussion about pay to play. Do you want to put money towards the project? I just said stop the bus. I'm really not interested in that at this point. If there are funds available through OTC to do funds for projects that you want to do, let's go hard. But right now, if you know, I have the list of the organizations. I don't see any of these organizations having the capacity to go back and say, oh yeah, here's an extra 10,000 or 20,000 in these projects. We don't. So the real important piece around this is that they are signatories. They are involved. They're involved in the discussions. They're involved in saying we have a role to play in making a difference. And I think that's the important part of this one.
So our intention is to bring council up to date, because it was one of those, as we know, a committee that we sat on that not all council was present for. So we wanted to bring it up to date, make sure that information so people have a chance to digest it. If there's any questions that come up afterwards, I'm sure one of the three of us can certainly answer, but we wanted to bring it forward so that council had a chance to see it and basically go from there. And we'll be looking for council direction in a council meeting. If council is agreeable, that I can still enter this agreement on behalf of the city, because that's where we're headed.
And I think it's important to add one more thing, is that the city has been a conduit for the activities within our community, and thanks to Leo and our staff that we've put them on our calendar so that the community members can recognize the activities that are going on. Lakeland College has done a fabulous job in terms of bringing in a Indigenous speaker series. Fred Sakamoose, and they had Harold Johnson. I hope I don't get his name wrong, sorry, but he used to be the former prosecuting district attorney, or I don't know what his title was, but is now engaged in working with Aboriginal communities to work and on the ground with his wife and another lady in terms of developing policies and dealing with alcoholism and drug abuse in those communities. So there are a number of speakers they brought in. There are other events, certainly dealing with Bonnie over at the Friendship Center. They have activities going on. There's other lists. And I think a part of it is to make people aware in the community, and that's part of the role we've played as a communicator, that, hey, these activities are going on. I've been out to Onion Lake and been at the Round Dance and their powwow, and they're saying, we're hearing, bring more, you know, and be aware. It's an incredible event. It's a very powerful event. And so, you know, we have, there are a lot of things that are being done, and by different agencies. The Public School Division they've actually hired people that focus specifically on Indigenous activities. The college, Lakeland College, has as well. He's doing a phenomenal job, and Lakeland College just opened up an Indigenous Student Center at the college. And so there's all these pieces that are slowly coming together and has developed some momentum. So there's stuff being done. I think it's important. It's not like we're starting at zero here in terms of what we're talking about. So I'll make a motion to bring it to the next meeting.
Seconder? Any further discussion or comments? Not seeing any? Call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you very much.
So Dan, we'll do the substitute of part of Treaty 6 in that document. Oh, you know what? We'll let them do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, moving on to agenda item 5.6, computer hardware refresh. City Manager.
Paul from my team will be Thank you, Your Worship and Council. Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. This topic is the 2018 computer refresh. Each year, laptops, desktops, and server equipment that are aged out are replaced with new equipment through the annual technology refresh project. Laptops and desktops are aged out after 4 years. Network equipment is aged out after 5 to 7 years. In 2018, we'll replace network equipment that is end of life and no longer supported. The laptop and desktop equipment that has reached the end of the production life cycle is either redeployed for training purposes or to staff that require minimal use of computers for their job duties. CDW Canada was a supplier of information technology supplies in 2016 and 17. We issued an RFP back on December 21st, 2017 for desktop computer hardware. It consisted of 62 laptops, 21 desktops, 19 network devices, as well as peripheral devices. RFP was released on the following sites: APC, SAS Tenders, and the City of Lloydminster bid and tenders on our website. We received 13 proposals. 6 proposals were eliminated due to incomplete bids or incorrect items quoted. Upon evaluation of the proposal, CDW Canada was chosen based on the criteria in the table. A couple notes about that. For CDW, under the quality proposal, they rated slightly higher. They took extra time having known us and tailored the proposal with some background information to us. As well, under the reference check, CDW having supplied IT technology in the previous 2 years, they provided some excellent service on those orders, and they also help us with solutions and orders throughout the year. So we have a good relationship with them. The objective is to replace age-out or end-of-life computer and network equipment. The options there are to bring forward to the next council meeting on January 29th, CDW as the recommendation, or not bring it forward, or request further information from the administration. As far as budget, the 2018 capital budget allocated $158,500 for desktop and hardware replacement. So desktop was $133,500 of that, and the network hardware was $25,000 of that budget. So this overall project comes in within budget.
Thank you, Paul.
Are there any questions?
Questions, comments? Councillor Baker.
I just have one. I don't know a thing about this to start with. I just want you to know, Paul. You know that. When you get 2 tenders, like the first 2 bids, 57.77, price 58.7, like when you're over on the right-hand side there, they're pretty well equal. So what am I missing here? Like, is it the quality of the proposal that wins the bid, or is it because you used the same product before, or what?
Thank you, Worship, through to Councillor Baker. Yeah, the difference between those two, the price was within about $1,000. CDW, again, on their quality proposal, rated slightly higher because they took the extra time, tailored the proposal towards us, having known us, having worked with us over the last couple of years.
It's easy to justify is really what I'm saying. Because people question sometimes those kind of things. I'm not saying they will, but you can justify it very easily as what's important.
Yes, by that. And the price is a calculation based on, so the lowest tender gets the full 60%. 60% was price. So the lowest tender gets that full 60, and then after that, it's a calculation for the price. That's why those are 57.77.
So I guess the question I have to ask as I look at this, so in this case, this is strictly a measured hardware. So every computer, we bid out computers and the devices, and I'm not far behind Councillor Baker, I'm no IT specialist either. But apples to apples, everyone has bid on apples. We're all looking at the same apples. It's, if using a term that simple.
Yeah, that's correct, Your Worship. In the RFP, I think, was in the package. So we specified here is here's the list of equipment. HP, here's the model, switches, so it was essentially a list of equipment.
So my concern is we're leaving $5,500 difference between, and when I look at, when there's service involved, there's always a question. What's that service going to be like in the relationship? And there is service from the perspective of supplying the material, but I'm struggling with this a little bit because this is one of those times I know that there's different weightings for the categories, which I appreciate, and we haven't just said price is the only factor. But in the case that $5,500 and $132,000 purchase versus $138,000, there's some money there on the table that the equipment that they're going to be supplying, be it Bear Tech Solutions, is the one I'm looking at. That's the lowest, and they're all very close from that perspective. But is it that $5,500 in our pocket versus in CDW's pocket? It would feel better in our taxpayers' pocket, I believe, than the city's pocket from that perspective. And I wrestle with that because I understand. I look at the reference checks. They scored a 12 versus 16, which we've got a relationship with CDW in the past, and certainly the proposal, I appreciate that, but at the end of the day, it's going to depend on what comes out of that box. And if we have the same computer come out of the box from Bear Tech versus CDW, $5,500 price tag for that. That's what I'm looking at. And I'm certainly open to council's thoughts because that's something I think we need to be aware of. Because we don't have a specific policy that says that the lowest bid. We certainly have demonstrated that in the past. But now I'm measuring something as simple as, and I would say the same thing if we were buying a yard of gravel from company A, B, or C. A yard of gravel that meets the specs, be it crushed or asphalt, that meets a certain test, or concrete's even better with the NTIA test, or PA test. That's where I'm wrestling with it. So I look for some input from council on this because that's the one I'm wrestling with.
I was going to add to this is that, certainly if CDW was the lowest bidder last time, now they've changed places.
Yeah.
And are actually trying to sell their relationship as part of the bid. And I mean, that's fair game, and I understand that. The only difference I see now, though, is if you look at Bear Tech, it's 4 points lower on the reference check. So obviously there must have been something there on delivery and relationship with those people, which can be critical if they're not there on the time they're supposed to be. If the product is not out there and it's not completed in that time, then what's that worth when your internet's not working or the computer's not working?
Oh, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
Paul, if I could ask this, have you ever done business with Bear Tech yourself or through the city and any other business that we can?
Your Worship, no, we haven't. Out of that list of companies, primarily the one we've done business with was CDW. There was another company that missed Compugen. They missed including some stuff, so they were excluded. That's another company that we've done a fair bit of business with as well.
Any other comments or thoughts from council?
So Your Worship, I guess I have to ask, based on your comments, direction to proceed to council, or do we need to go back? I mean, I guess I maybe look to Doug to help out, but if we needed to change to make it solely based on price, I think we would need to reissue the tender to that fact.
To that fact, if we're going to go with that perspective. And I guess it doesn't have to be, I look to Council Torres, who's got.
No, I'm just of the opinion, once you make these prices public, you don't go back to reissue a tender. I think that's a big no-no, so I think it's appropriate to bring it to council based on the information we have right now, but then there may be additional information that they decide to provide. I'm not sure that we need anything right now.
Councillor Did you comment, Councilor?
Yeah, you bet. So on the CW, is there any additional value that CDW makes the difference?
Provide, one thing they do is they register the care packs. So the HP care packs are the warranty for the laptops. And there's a registration process that you would need to go through with HP. That's one thing that they take care of. It's a minor task, but it is something that they do as well.
Councilor Baker.
Your Worship, just to follow up there, Paul has done his presentation. There's nothing to vote on.
Nope.
Next council meeting, we can decide. He answered the questions, and that's all we do, right?
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. I think you've covered off the basis, Paul. Thank you very much, and I appreciate that you've weighted it. And we'll be talking about procurement, but I think that's important that there's a number of factors that's looked at because price isn't necessarily the only item. There's other factors, and you've certainly done some due diligence. Appreciate that, and the team that you put together. And it's nice to see the scoring cut. I think that demonstrates that the market is being competitive. Prices are very relatively on that percentage of dollars. So thank you very much for those efforts, and I think it's ready to, as Councilor Baker said, I think it's ready to come forward and to do. So the question, I guess, is, do we need an actual a motion with those options, or I think we can send them directly?
Well, I think the fact that you've asked them to bring it back and then make a decision at an open council meeting is sufficient.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Next item on the agenda is 5.7. Apologies. Proposed fire department staffing model to the city manager. I imagine the fire chief will be coming up.
Chief to present.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me back here again to present on the fire department staffing proposal. I made a short presentation today. I made it a little bit different than I have presented in the past, just mainly based on feedback I've heard through the previous council and GPC meetings. So a little bit of a background. There was presentations made during the staffing for our 2018 budget deliberations. I believe the first GBC I came to was last summer, and then a couple times through December. So what we budgeted for was the addition of 4 full-time employees to serve as on-shift fire captains to add that leadership and capacity to our current staffing model. What initiated this review from the fire department was we were finding we weren't sustainable. We were spinning our wheels. We noticed that we had a turnover rate of approximately 30%. So about a third of our department was turning over year over year. Not that that's crazy uncommon. Those traditional volunteer fire departments, which we are, their industry norms are around 20%. Hybrid models, I think most notably Ottawa just published their numbers. They're a hybrid fire department. They run about 10 to 15%. Why I came was investments must be made into the staffing for the fire services to ensure the future viability and sustainability of the service. When I brought this model forward, I did make some assumptions. I assume that volunteers are and will continue to be the backbone of the Lloydminster Fire Service. And as the city grows, the demand for service is outstripping the ability for the current volunteer model to cope. The complexities of the modern Lloydminster are putting incredible strains on full-time and volunteer staff to maintain required competencies, training, and experience. And this proposal remains a first step in an overall modernization of the Lloydminster Fire Services and how we support and encourage our volunteers and our fire personnel. So just to give you an overview of the current fire department we have right now, I've included a picture along the right-hand side as a little bit of imagery for you. That right-hand side, that's what we refer to as our members board. That hangs at fire station number 1. With that, you can see our full fire department listed. You can see that we have 1 fire chief, 2 deputy chiefs, which are all full-time employees. You can see that we have 5 captains. 1 of those is full-time, that is the training officer, safety officer. That's the position that was added through the reorganization of the city. That position is mainly responsible for the training and safety functions within the fire department. We have 4 other captains who are volunteer. And then we have 30 volunteer firefighters. That list of firefighters is organized and based on seniority, with the top of the list being the highest in seniority down to the bottom. To kind of give you that overview of how we are being unsustainable, I want to share you just some of the years of service. So in the industry, we have what is known as probationary firefighters. Similar program that we have here in Lloydminster. We have a year-long program where we give brand new people some basic skills to operate on the fire scene. So in our program, lasting a year, we have 9 members within that 0 to 1 years of experience. So if you direct your attention towards number 14, B. Willard, everyone below that line is within that 0 to 1 years of experience in the probationary level. Now to add on to the industry norms, there's something else in the industry we use. We use different classes of firefighter. Generally, it's a 4-year length process where you start as probationary, work your way up to what's known as a first-class firefighter. That's pretty much a way for the industry to regulate and understand that after 4 years, you have skills, experience, competencies required to perform work at a high level. Currently, we have 22 firefighters within that 0 to 3 years of experience. So if you direct your attention towards number 30, J. Granger.
Sorry, can you repeat that number, 22?
Yes, so 22 volunteer firefighters are within that 0 to 3 years of experience. So if you direct your attention towards number 30, J. Granger, everyone below that line is within that 0 to 3 years of experience. They haven't reached that first class level yet. That's about 73% of our volunteer fire department, the firefighters. This brings in that we have to find some retention within our fire department to allow those lower level, lower experienced people to reach that top of that board. Another thing that we do right now is we require a huge amount of overtime on our current full-time employees to augment the capacity of the fire department. Exorbitant amount of hours are put in by the full-time staff right now to maintain maintain service levels.
So just before that slide, so the 8 above that name you gave, are they all first class, or is there another higher designation, or so anything above? You said Granger, those 8 of them, right? So are those guys all first class or higher? Or?
That's what we could refer to as a first class firefighter. We don't have ours broken up just because we haven't been able to have the competencies to build those different levels and so the different amount of skills that they can.
But they're all 4+ years experience.
Yes, correct. I believe the top of the list is about 13 years of experience. That'd be number 1, Espert. And if we go down to C. Volchinsky, he and the 2 right above him just reached their 4-year mark.
So there's 8 members, 4+.
Yes.
8 volunteer members.
Yes.
And they're all first class.
Yes. Well, it could be considered as first class. So it was also brought up during budget deliberations, how do we compare to other communities? And that's important for us to look at. How do mid-sized communities offer fire protection to their residents? So I just pulled a graph. I got this information off all these cities' websites. There is many more, but I just figured I'd pick some notable ones. As we're looking at mid-sized communities, you see I have a smaller one, North Battleford, about 13,000 population, up to Spruce Grove, which is about 34,000 population. So what's common with all of them? They all have a full-time fire chief, including us. as well as deputy chiefs. They range from 1 to 3 deputy chiefs. I added our training officer position there because it is supervisory in nature. It's just not something noted on a lot of people's staffing models on their website anyways. As far as admin, most cities do have 1 to 2 admin positions dedicated for the fire department. Currently, we do all of our own admin work ourselves. Now, what we're all looking for is the full-time firefighters list. You can see that some of these smaller communities, they have 16 full-time firefighters, ranging up to some of the bigger centers on that list, Spruce Grove, Moose Jaw, and they range from 40 to 46 full-time firefighters. That's not management, that's not support staff, that is full-time answering calls for service. Currently, and then you can see the volunteer list on the side. So some of these departments have hybrid models or different ways to do business, so I have a volunteer list as well. So one of the interesting things there, if we're going to look at communities that are similar to us, I know every community has their own unique risks and everything, but if we're looking at that Moose Jaw and Spruce Grove, very similar population, they have 40, 46 full-time firefighters. So currently, we're trying to do the same amount of work as them with less and volunteers in nature. So when you see these other communities, you're going to see some similar numbers, whether it be 16, 20, 40, all kind of those kind of numbers. So I'm going to show you how fire department staffs. I know that was brought up during our budget deliberations. So excuse my crude drawings. Those red boxes, they're meant to represent fire trucks. The green box is meant to represent that command function. So this is an easy way to represent what a city our size needs to prepare for our community, just for most basic small instances. So if you look at those communities, those smaller mid-sized cities that are working with 16 full-time firefighters, what they do is they staff 1 fire truck. So those 4 bubbles within our red square, and firefighters work on 4 shifts. So that's how they came to 16 firefighters. Now if you add the command function in there, that's how they get to 20. And then that's how they build on further to that. So what I had asked and looking to implement was to slowly add pieces to those bubbles. As time goes on and we need to develop, we can add 1 position, whether say a daytime position, or if we need to add 4 positions to cover 24 hours for full-time firefighters. But this is an overall look of what modern day firefighting looks like in a mid-sized community. Now, why I've implemented or why I've asked for this initiative is because if you just go straight to a fire truck, which is a lot what communities do, that's how they staff. They just based on a fire truck to cover X amount of area for a growing city. Based on collectives right now, I would, on average, about $2.5 million to staff a fire truck at a time. To conclude my presentation, investment must be made in capacity. It's critical to the success of the fire department. How that investment is positioned is a work in progress. What we need is that long-term strategy around fire protection and the staffing model required to provide council service level direction in a growing Lloydminster. To conclude, I'm not married to this initiative. I'm not married to this staffing model. I can prepare any kind of staffing model that council's direction. There's other options. We can look at what industry norms are, how other communities staff. We can also look at bringing consultants in to give us their expert advice. This initiative was brought forward by the fire department as a better way to reach modernization within our fire department and sustainability. Thank you. If I can answer any questions.
Councilman Rowe.
So when did you have your last turnover, like your last volunteer member leave? How long have we been sustaining at this number?
Thank you, Councillor. That's an excellent question. So since last summer, when I made the preparations at GPC, we haven't actually lost any firefighters, which generally we were losing that 30%, 35%, so that'd be about 10 a year. So ever since, there's been that option of investment from the community or from council, there we haven't lost anyone. As well as we were short 11 members going into our last section hiring, our group hiring that we did. And so we got 5 people applied for the job.
And that's since summer.
That's since summer, yes.
Okay, so if we didn't go with this hybrid model, are there other incentives that we could use to recruit new volunteers?
Thank you, Councillor. I think we're always looking to explore any kind of incentive we can get to bring people in. And we also need to find a way for people to stay. I have implemented, and since I've been the fire chief, some retention programs where we can recognize years of service. But I think our biggest issue is getting people to stay.
I can't remember where it was that you said that you took this hybrid model from, somewhere in BC. So do you take into consideration the difference in geographical landscape, rate of response time that it takes there versus here?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Like I said, all communities will have their own uniqueness about them.
Right.
Whether it's even, we look at the Spruce Grove and Leduc, their response times are, they do have larger geographical area there. And that is why I can believe with the same size community, they had 3 fire stations, and I believe they had an additional 60 volunteers to offset their career personnel.
Right. So with what we have currently, are your members taxed? Are they exhausted? Or are we maintaining the status quo? They're happy, they're not fatigued, they're not?
Yes, that's correct. We are losing members due to burnout. When I started doing exit interviews, because we never did exit interviews before, I'd say the majority are leaving because they're burnt out. We do lose some just because they move on to other communities to settle their life and hopefully join volunteer fire departments.
Would you say with these current numbers though that they're burnt out? This is way too low?
Yes, correct.
Because I think you said 44 before. Is that ideal?
So,
is that correct?
So we're fully
I'm
staffed
trying to remember.
for 44 full employees. So we have 4 full-times right now, and we're supposed to have 40 volunteers.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, Councillor Belichick.
So, Jordan, I guess in this plan, what are the key metrics that you want to, like, I'm going to say, hypothetically, let's approve this, and you come back to us and say it's working well. What will be those key indicators you're going to come back and say, that you say, this demonstrates to us that it's working? What are those metrics that you want to bring back?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. There should be lots of metrics that fire departments work to. Fire department success, we need goals to work towards. I don't know if you remember, but in our operational initiatives, I wanted to create a master plan for me to write, and that would be goal focused for the city on things we're trying to reach, whether it be response times, capacity, controlling fires within areas of homes, and that would be, I'd look to council's direction to adopt it. And then with that, we can look at what are our key indicators on when we need to more staff.
Okay, that's not doing it for me. I think those are all good things that we do normally with any fire plan, I guess. But I guess with this change, what would you expect to see different? I'm hoping that, so is there less turnover rate? Response time you suggested and would roll over in both plans.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm just thinking, I want to see how this plan, what those metrics would be around, particularly the human resource element for you.
Yes,
does that allow you to be more training? Does it allow more people sustaining it? So you have more people at the first, level? I mean, those are the kind of things, I guess, from a longer term vision we'd want to see grow. Because you've given us metrics on other areas where it's not working well. So I want to see what are the metrics when it is working well, and are we getting closer to it as a result of this plan? So
Yes.
Those big goals are good. We expect those to be there, but this area in particular is really an HR kind of model that you want to deal with.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. So I did refer more to our external goals, or goals for our customers. Internally, I would like to see turnover rates match more like hybrid departments, that 15 to 20%.
Okay.
The training with this model that I propose would grow increasing amounts. Right now, we offer opportunities for 4 hours of training a month for our profession. If we went to a model like this, I mean, on a month with 31 days, there would be, say, 100 hours of training available to our fire department. So it's mainly based on retention.
Okay. So if we have more people there, will our budget go up? From an HR component as well? Because if we have 40 volunteers, we're sustaining them, we're doing training, do your operational costs go up? Because we pay per diem for some of these folks as well, right?
So the operational cost for our volunteer side or our
Yeah.
paid on call would go down.
Okay.
The cost would go up more on our, because we're paying for 4 full-time
Okay.
staff. I don't have the IR in front of me.
No, and
I believe
that's
it was
fine.
146,000 would be our net difference between what we're doing yesterday to what we could be doing tomorrow.
Councilor.
Thank you, Your Worship. As far as the presentation, I wasn't able to make the last one, but I thought it was a fantastic presentation, and you presented a reasoned argument for why a community of our size may need to make some adjustments to keep making it work. My only question is kind of around history. So, did we have this over the last 5 years? The problem, I assume, has gotten worse. And if in other downturns, if there were similar problems, because my assumption, and I don't know this for a fact, is that young single males who are predominantly who you were looking for volunteers are the types of people who would have left first as the economy started to downturn. So I'm only hesitant because I don't want to put a permanent fix on a temporary problem. And that's my main concern. Do you think that this is a temporary problem because of the downturn in the economy and people leaving? Or is this a permanent issue where we have to have some long-term vision and deal with it now?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Great question. So in my last presentation, I covered, I looked back to 2010. Even the records in 2010 were very gray, but that's as far back as I can find. We were running these turnover rates right from 2010. With just this recent history, we've had some less turnover. So this problem's been going on for as long as I can remember.
So we're not, it's not a knee-jerk right now to deal with this. This is something that's been a pervasive issue that we just at some point need to deal with before it becomes a bigger problem.
Yes, correct, Councillor.
Okay.
Councilor.
So I do realize that we have already approved this in budget, but I'm just wondering too, I know we can't really discuss numbers, but how do our volunteer firefighters compare to other cities in terms of wage, I guess, or remuneration for their services? Are we on the higher end, lower end? Like how are we kind of far?
Thank you, Councillor. We have never reviewed those numbers. If I would estimate, I would say we're close, but that's just an estimate.
I feel like that's something that we should look at, because if we're on the lower end, perhaps that's why we're not able also to retain the volunteer firefighters. Before making this huge step, I think we need to, you've provided excellent information to us. And fire services are obviously something that is essential, 100%, and I'm not objecting to this hybrid model. But I think we need to look at every other aspect and different incentives that we perhaps could offer before fully committing to this. And I think we definitely need to look at the wage if we haven't, to see where we stand on that aspect, because perhaps that's why one of the huge reasons is because we're coming in substantially lower than other communities. I don't know, but.
And I think if you ask what's the motivator, I'm not sure it would be the wages. Most people
Today, I think maybe.
Yeah, they're not making big bucks here.
Well, I know that, but if they know in Edmonton that they're making this much of a call out versus something else, money does matter to some people. And
I have a friend who's volunteered now 30 years, and it's like, yeah, it's my beer money. And
some people are that way,
but it's life-changing. It's not life-changing dollars, right?
No, but money is a motivator for some people.
Yes.
Right?
Council.
I just had one other somewhat question. I talked to someone about the system as it works right now, and also related to the downturn in the economy. Their comment was they believed that part of it is that the people who have jobs and decent jobs during the downturn, their employers were a little more reluctant to let them run out in the middle of the day for a fire call because, well, they're the only guy in the office who's doing that work and they're losing productivity. So, you're not just losing, maybe they're losing the cost of that wage for that period, but they could be losing the revenue for whatever that person was doing otherwise. My question is, have you ever seen in other communities where there's kind of incentives to business owners as far as something they can do to kind of make the juice a little bit more favorable for the business owners because they're the ones who are potentially losing greater value in this whole ordeal if there's a fire call in the middle of the day.
Thank you, Council.
Sorry, I just need to-
Thank you, Councillor. I don't know that there's much out there for employers. We did at one time offer an employer night where they could come in and see the fire hall. We haven't done that of late just because we weren't getting a whole lot of interest. I know the Alberta Fire Chiefs many years ago they used to offer stickers to employers. From what I hear, it didn't go very far. At my last regional meeting, there wasn't a whole lot using it.
So have you heard from any of our firefighters that that's why they're leaving? Because their boss doesn't let them go?
No, we maintain an excellent relationship with our firefighters' employers. Our firefighters, I think, go above and beyond. When we do call them out to, say, put out a vehicle fire, they stay late at work to try and catch up. We try and balance our employers' needs with the city's fire protection needs.
Councillor Creighton.
Yeah, I think we've got a lot to be thankful for with this department. If we take a look over the years that it's been operating on a volunteer basis, we've far exceeded what we should have. And I think I've taken a look at some of the other departments, and Ottawa is just, as you mentioned, they do have a hybrid, and they just had a huge increase. I think in most cases, the fire departments are very high up, like second or third in budgets. So it is a real expense, and I believe that we've got away with that quite easily. I have spoken to a couple of fire members, and certainly there is a big time commitment, and that seems to be one of the issues is the call-outs, the training, the house inspections. They seem to spend a lot of time down at the station. There's no question, and with the shortage of men, it just amplifies that. So. I think the morale, from what I understand, is down a little bit, just because of that. And I think that there's some folks that are waiting to hear the decision here on how that hybrid is going to look.
Thanks, Councillor. Any other comments? Certainly, I'll wade into it because I've had the opportunity to serve in a volunteer fire department, and I think that I'd be curious to see what the pay equity is to answer Councillor Monroe's question, that's for sure. But in the past, it certainly wasn't about the pay. I don't look to the chief and say, can you explain why people run into a burning building and everybody runs out? And I don't think he's got an explanation. It's just one of those things that happens from that perspective. But certainly, I think you've raised some very good points. Thank you for the presentation, Chief Newton. I think you filled in a lot of blanks. One area I'm always concerned about, and you've addressed it, but in yourself, the deputy chiefs, and the paid captain, have you guys been able to structure your management shifts so that ensuring that you do get some downtime? Because it's certainly, you carry a great deal of responsibility. You look after 32,000 people and you ensure their safety every day. And I want to make sure that all the pieces are in place so that you and your deputy chiefs and our paid captain are not in a position that you're burning yourselves out, because that'll lead to wanting to move somewhere else, and we'd certainly like to keep you. So what's being done to ensure that you four today, without anything happening in the background, are being managing yourselves and getting the help that you need?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I can share a little bit about this. So when I started as a deputy fire chief, I was going to every single call. I believe when I started, it was very beginning of July. My first night off, and it was a weekend night, was about 2.5 months after. We have reduced the amount, and we've started to structure our call-outs based on severity and who's going. So there has been some alleviating the problem of that overtime. I do have numbers that I can probably share with you in camera.
Okay. Well, that's fabulous. And I just, like I say, I want to make sure that we're dealing today with what we've got and what we're working towards something different, but certainly today from that perspective. And I think that a big thank you to all our volunteers and to the employers of those volunteers, because I think that it's a two-part, as we talked about. The employers make the time available for their employees. I appreciate the employees stepping up as volunteers, and there's a unique relationship there. For some, I'm sure some are self-employed, but many of them may be working in a large company or in a very small company, and maybe even the owners of those companies. So there's a huge commitment there that many of us don't realize. It's volunteering on a Saturday afternoon is one thing, but when you get shaken out at 4 in the morning or whatever time of the day or night, it changes it. So from that perspective. So, well, thank you very much. I think, we've got a lot of information there. Council?
Yeah, sorry, I don't want to come across as cold-hearted. I definitely appreciate, and I know that they're running into the burning house because they genuinely care. But obviously there is the money factor too that I think is important for us to have that information. But I mean, I know it's not money driven, but I just want to say that I do appreciate it. So that's not what I wasn't trying to come across that way, if it did.
No, thank you, Councillor. It didn't at all. It's important
I
to
just
look
felt
at
the
everything.
fire over here.
My predecessor did review salaries and wages, I believe in 2013. I'd have to look to our old general manager of public safety on that, where he did look at wages and it was moved up at that time.
I just want to make sure that they're compensated, that's all. It had nothing to do with that was their incentive to run into the burning fire and save money on it.
City Manager, do you have a comment?
Yeah, just, Councillor, in 2013, there was a review of the volunteers' remuneration, and they did move it up slightly.
Councillor?
Yeah, I really appreciate the time and effort you put into this, and the only thing I would say is that I'm suspecting that this will come back to the next council meeting and for us to vote on. I think it would be really enriched, if you like, if you were to come back with, you talk about some of those metrics that we'd be looking for, and I think that would be good to add to it. You talk about response times, rollover rates, training opportunities, overtime rates, and I would suggest even doing a satisfaction survey with the guys to say, where are you at, what's going on, what do you like about this, and what's working and not working. And so maybe a quarterly review or even 6 months after this to see where you're at, to see, is this working, is it accomplishing what you want to accomplish? A lot of times we have all the best laid plans and there's all these unplanned outcomes that arise because of just the way things are. But I think those would be some of the pieces, and I can write them down and pass them on to you after. If you like.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. That is a great thing we can add, and that's something we can add into a master plan, where we not only look at external goals for service, we can also look at internal goals, and I can have that in there for that 10-year span that a master plan would be adopted for.
Perfect.
Any other questions? Well, thank you. Thank you, Chief. Very good presentation. I'll look to council for direction for a potential short break.
So moved.
Short break. Seconded by Councilor Fagin. All in favor? We'll adjourn for 5 minutes. Or so. I'll look to the members of council for direction on returning back into, thank you, Council.
Motion to reconvene.
Motion to reconvene, seconded. Council Thorson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving back to agenda item 5.8, October 2017 monthly financials. I have to city manager.
From our finance department, Brooke will be coming to present.
Welcome, Brooke.
Hi, Brian. Good afternoon. So administration has prepared the October monthly financial statements for your review and feedback. Did anyone have any questions or comments?
Council Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question on, I think it was on the balance sheet. Sorry, I've got it here. My brain, I just had it. Okay, sorry, I'm going to go to the statement of operations and expenses instead.
Could you give us a page number, Councilor, off the top?
48.
48, thank you.
Just on the, and we may have asked this before and I don't recall the answer, but in number 10 for administration, the difference, part of it is because plant operator salaries were budgeted to each facility, but actual were posted to administration. Is that because of the reorg that happened mid-year?
Could you give the, sorry, page number?
48.
Thank you, Your Worship, to the council person. Yes, it is because of the reorg. Plant operators used to be under administration. Now they're in community development.
Okay, just making sure I understood that. The other thing I was going to ask is, and I probably have asked this one before, the cost of goods sold, there's a budgeted number, but we never actually record anything until the end of the year. Is that the same thing that we do every year as far as we have a budgeted number through the year, even though we don't make any adjustments until the last month?
Thank you, Your Worship, through the council person. Yes, so moving forward, now that there's 2 managers in the finance department, our goal for 2018 would be to do those entries as the lots are being sold. But currently just capacity they need to at the end of the year.
Oh, okay. We had the best intentions of recording it monthly, but it became one of those things you just can't get at before month end's closed because we don't have enough people. Fair enough. Okay, that's really all I had on that. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I do have another one. I forgot, yeah. This is just for FCSS. I noted that there was a profit at the end of October. I assume that, that will go away by the end of the year. It just seems like of all the departments, facilities to have positive net income for the period, it just seemed bizarre. Do you have any comment on that one?
Thank you.
I'll get you a page number, sorry everyone, so you can follow where I'm saying. This is page 56.
Thank you.
So in family community support, FCSS, there are other service areas than just FCSS, like the airport, for example, is included in there. So with the reorg and that kind of thing, we're going to look at how we segment these different service areas and look at rearranging those to more appropriate.
Okay.
Councilor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. That, and sitting on FCSS, I can tell you that there was another call for applications to the tune of about $26,000 that hadn't been allocated by that committee to that point, so that could still be sitting in there as unallocated, looking like a profit number.
Yeah, and with FCSS too, the city does support more than the 20% that we're required to as part of receiving the grant funds for that program. It just, I guess, doesn't clearly show that in this statement.
Okay, that's fine.
Councilor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question. A lot of stuff here, a lot of good work. But when you're going through it all, my biggest concern is that any accounts in trouble. Like, I mean, there's little overs, a little under, but in this 100 pages of information, is there any specific accounts in real trouble? In your mind?
Thank you, Your Worship, through the Councilor Baker. we kind of tried to note the ones where there's a greater variance in the notes to the financial statements. So just some of the revenue accounts being a little under, like utilities, photo radar, the storm sewer. And administration has really worked hard on trying to compensate for those decreases in revenues by also cutting expenses so that we kind of stay in a surplus position.
So I gotta just have a follow-up question, because a budget's a budget. And sometimes you get into trouble, not for any real reason, nobody's fault, but we're in trouble. Then you gotta look at other things and say, where can we cut back or hold back so we can live within our budget? We've had situations where maybe we haven't quite done that at times, and I really hope we all keep that in mind, just to make sure that at least we're all aware of it, and then if we, like today, you heard earlier, there are some requests for unbudgeted money. Well, if council decides to spend that money, we gotta know where it's coming from, and not necessarily create ourselves a deficit just because. So that's important in my mind, that we keep a handle on that, and I'm sure you do. Thank you.
Yes, we do. So if you looked at the variance column for revenues and expenses to the end of October, we are 3.26 down from budgeted revenues, but our expenses are down 3.9 million. So that is something to try and keep in mind.
I think that's, I appreciate that. We're already into the first month of the first new year, and we're looking at October, so I know this is something that's taken very seriously at finance and from the city manager's office.
I didn't think we were broke yet, Your Worship, but
no, we're not, and we certainly are a long ways from it, and we don't want to be in that position. I think that as a city staff and team, I think they've led a great charge of ensuring that we're watching the pennies as best as we can to ensure that at the end of the year that we're on a positive note rather than a negative note. Councilor Torson.
Thank you, Your Worship. This might be a question for Executive Manager of Operations, but I was just curious on number 12, which is again on page 48. What's the difference between winter maintenance and roadway services? Just between the two, I don't fully know what the difference is between the two.
Winter maintenance would be strictly to do with, the maintenance of the roads, fixing any potholes that have to be done. The other is more of a planned thing ongoing. I would like to give Mr. Henning to provide some more details.
Well, even just with that answer, that kind of gives me a question for Brooke is if it is pothole repairs, those would be non-capital, versus the street improvement would be a capital project that goes on the balance sheet, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, just making sure that that's clear, because just the wording of it, I got a little confused when I was reading the notes to that one, as far as street repairs being different than budgeted, but it means like a small pothole rather than it is tearing up a road and replacing it. Thank you.
Are you okay with that? I see Mr. Henning's willing to certainly want to speak out.
Yeah, what happens is we're getting these thaw conditions. So the roadway maintenance is basically towards our summer projects. So in a situation like this, on Washington side, we're doing potholes. We even opened up the catch basins last week due to the thaw. So that's based down into the roadway maintenance, but where our winter maintenance does concentrate usually on all summer projects.
Okay.
Thank you, Dave.
Smarter.
Perfect. I just want to add that I really appreciate the footnotes or column notes, whatever, they appear in the bottom, but it really helps a lot for me. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
One that just jumps out at me, because I'm trying to remember if we have from year to year, but it's great to see Weaver Park. We've actually slightly ahead in the form of a profit at Weaver Park, and in the past Weaver Park, I'm sure it depends on the year, but the campground certainly did have good revenue this year. It's not much, but rather than subsidizing $120,000, they're actually $4,000 or so dollars, maybe a little better than that to the good, which is, I think it's a hats off to the team, and both marketing and ensuring that the campground is being run efficiently. I kind of appreciate that very much, because it's those little ones that can also now it's just as much as $1 million or $1.5 million. It's when we see a break even at least, because we're not in the business. It's nice to make a little bit of a profit once in a while. on services of the city rather than have to subsidize it. So I think that was just one that caught my mind. Excuse me, out of the side. Any other questions or comments? Certainly there's a lot of documents there with the accounts payable, and I did go through them, but nothing jumped out at me too badly. So, any other comments? Thank you very much, Brooke. Moving on to the agenda to 5.9, wastewater. And I'll look to the city manager
In absence of Mr. Stang today, Terry is going to present from engineering.
Welcome, Terry. It's glad you got that memo.
No doubt. All right, wastewater treatment facility project delivery. Back in March of 2017, we procured the services of ISL Engineering and Land Services as our city's owner's engineer. At that period of time, we were looking at a design, build, procurement method and moving forward with the wastewater treatment facility. Recently with the Saskatchewan Water Security Agency and also the Environment Canada issuing a directive, a December 31st, 2020 has been placed on the City of Lloydminster as needing to be compliant with effluent regulations. In order to really make this deadline, administration went through a review of project delivery methods. There's various methods out there, and to be able to meet the deadline, we decided to go through this process. Based on the review, the recommendation is that an integrated project delivery method be used. This method is unique in that it contractually puts the owner into the agreement, as well as the designer and the contractor, and they're all bound in delivering the project. So they're all making decisions just as one. These players share in the ideas and decisions that come along the length of the project, and also share in potential profits. So a couple of key things here in the table there is just the differences between a design build and IPD. So on the contractor engagement, that being the contractor actually starting the work or whatever else, in the DB or design build side of things, you're looking at about a 12 to 30 month time period after the start. The 12 to 30 months is where it takes to actually acquire that contractor or officially, yeah, you got it, sorry, that one. But on the IPD side of things, once the agreement is in place, it's approximately 3 to 6 months. And again, the initial side of it is creating the contracts and getting everything in place. But when enough work has been done, the contractor will start working. And so there's quite a substantial time savings in that aspect of things. On the contractor driver, again, what's guiding him in completing the project? So in the design build side of things, delivering just what is in that guiding documents. So on that guiding document side of things, that's really, like on the DB side, is really imperative that that initial document before we go out to tender on that agreement has to be exactly what we want. Everything over and above after the agreement is signed ends up becoming a change order on the city itself. On the IPD, it's up to that team to come up with a strategy of what we want to build. So it's more fluid, it's happening throughout the design phases and everything else, but still having some targets established as well. Budget overruns, again, I talked about that gaps, and that's where they come into play. Whereas the IPD is part of that team to but come up with efficiencies and other key areas where you can actually come up and still maintain that budget. So some other key advantages and disadvantages here. So on the advantage side, increasing the transparency. All team members are active in this project. You're not siloed by any means. That's the unique part of that IPD contract. Time savings. Again, going back up to that time savings I showed on the table before. Shared accountability. Again, that agreement is very, very bound. You're bound into that agreement, very, very structured, and that responsibility is shared across all team members, thus
sharing that responsibility and getting things fixed and everything else as progress goes. And one other key advantage that we see here is the opportunities for local preference and procurements of goods and services in the construction phase where feasible. That is us as being, that the city, I should say, not us, the city as part of that key team member in the IPD contract, is we can actually ask and require some local contractor availability into this project. And again, where feasible, we're not going to ask or try to get our local community to do some where they just can't. But if there's an opportunity, we can ensure that or require that. On the disadvantage side of things, trust is a key one. Again, IPD is a unique thing, and where you work together, and good relationships are very, very key. So that is one thing that you have to really, really work on when you're working together in these contract side of things. And of course, familiarity. It is relatively new. We're all 10 plus years old, so it is a pretty new thing, but it still has some enough teeth that it's very applicable. Some of the next steps, or actually the next steps in moving forward to this, we bring forward to council a request to revise our owner's engineer agreement with ISL to a standard agreement, allowing ISL to start some basic looking into the IPD contract, setting up the foundation for it, informing education, more education on the side of things of what the uniqueness of that is, working with the city and procuring the remaining team members, those key team members I'm talking about, contractor. It can be more than one contractor in this thing, and it comes down to what are the key players, and that's where that KBS side of things is coming into. So it's still a public procurement process with KBS. It's just quality based and not price based in that aspect of things. The other one, conduct the necessary work and assist the city in commencement of the agreement. Again, that agreement is very complex. It is complex, and this assistance will be provided as well. Ultimately, after that's all in place, the approval of the actual agreement in which the work starts to move forward. And the first step in that work of an IPD contract before even construction happens is creating the commencement of this target value design. This target value design is where the team gets together and comes up with a base price per se. It's not really driven as to a design-based side of things. It's more of a theoretical, more meat to it than that. And that is what everything gets driven from. So what we're trying to build, our goals and objectives in that side of things as well. I think that's about all I have. Again, the big thing on here is, nothing's going to go through until sufficient funding is approved. We're just looking at this whole new process as being something that, well, not something, it will be the only thing that we'll be able to meet these type of deadlines with at this point in time. And of course, if we don't move forward, we have the Water Security Agency as well as Environment Canada can and will impose fines and penalties associated with it as well.
Thank you, Terry.
Yeah, sorry.
Councilor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Terry, in terms of your understanding of this process, is there any other model that we could do that would still achieve a completion date by December 2020?
No, the collaborative approach to doing the design with the contractor is key in shortening that time period. The DB, or design build, has that, but to acquire that services as part of the process just takes too long.
Yeah, because with the design build, you build 6 to 8 months into the design process right off the bat that you would almost even lose a construction season, wouldn't you?
Yes, yeah, that is correct, Councilor Torrance. The DB side of things, the city would issue a tender looking for a design and a contractor team to do a bid. And what they will do is they'll do a 30% design on what you give them that guiding documents, as I talked about before. We come back and review all these proposals, ultimately say it's X, the team X, and then from there they continue on. So you're talking about moving more down the time frame.
Thank you. That's more or less the answer I thought it was. But the only other question I was wondering is, are you aware of any other success stories in terms of using this this model?
Yeah, I actually went down to went to a conference in this, and it's used quite
quite a varied aspect of things. And even on the ones that didn't fully succeed, I guess, in all reality, they still approved of the process. But successfully, there's one big project in Edmonton, and I forgot, I just completely dropped it, sorry. But there has been some successes.
Even for when it comes to council, if you have an example of how it really works.
There's one, so sorry, just jump in there. Actually, the Alberta government has been using it as part of their school programs too. So when they brought forward the big money to build 5, 10 schools, whatever else, they've been using this process for this last tenders that we've been doing.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. Again, good presentation. I think one of the factors perhaps that are working in our favor will, I think, address some of the issues that certainly when we're building a school in Lloyd Public, the general contractors were generally pretty good. There were some issues, but because the economy was so hot, it was tough to get the right subcontractors. You couldn't always get the A list. So you got the B, C, sometimes you got the D list. I mean, there were problems with painters and all those kind of pieces that were there. I mean, the economy at this point is not so hot that, you know, you can't find someone to do the job, and that might be, I think, certainly an incentive for people that are out there who are just wanting to work that will be prepared to commit to this kind of process. So I think that works in our favor. The piece still is, I guess, building trust, and that always will be the challenge. And I think certainly that initial piece that we heard from the ISL engineer and making sure the right people are at the table to move this process along is still absolutely critical. And so I'm not sure what all of our role is to make sure that we have the right people on the bus, so to speak, and at the table. But I think that first step is probably the most important one, because if you have the right people, it all works perfect like it should.
I think that's part of that QBS side of things is going to be imperative that they do understand IPD, right?
Yeah.
And the uniquenesses of it.
Now,
sure.
the only other piece too that I guess is a follow-up is that complexity of the contract, and what steps need to be taken in there. And I'm almost thinking that there's probably a degree of looseness in that process in order for people to make those changes, and that might not sit well if you're a lawyer, because they'll want to rivet it down to the point where there's absolutely no gray zones. So I think even those folks that are involved on our behalf need to recognize that there needs to be some tolerance levels relative to that process to let it unfold.
Yeah, for sure. And there's templates out there that people are even municipalities have been using. So we'll be looking forward to those to use for here.
Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Richard. Councilor Thorson's question was a good question. At the end of the day, in construction, there's two kinds of contracts. You have a fixed price contractor, you have a project manager, and you take the risk. There's no other kind of contract. And really what this is a project management contract. In my mind, there's not question. I'm not against it, I'm just saying that's what it is. I think one thing you have to really keep in mind here, you're going to have an owner's representative. Once construction starts, you've got to have a full-time owner's representative on site to see what's going on. Now, I don't know what general you're going to get or subjects, but I'm just telling you. You can check that out wherever you want to check it out. But really what it is we're talking is project management. Because if we end up with an overrun, we take the loss. If we go under, we get the benefit. But that's project management.
On this, again, the uniqueness of this process too, the agreement will put in a profit. And profit is the first thing to take any overruns. You whittle away this profit margin as you get into those overruns, right? You whittle that away. But as the design goes even farther, you may even find more efficiencies. So it's kind of a variable thing that's going to grow and shrink as time goes on. And towards the end, hopefully there is still some profit for the whole team, city included, into that aspect of things as well. If that profit goes away, it's a cost overrun, in my eyes, it's a cost overrun that is legitimate, and we as a city will be held responsible for that side of things.
Because the contractor bid was 7% profit. Just use that as a number, or whatever number. He's going to make 7%. He's got to make his money on his job. If you're a sub-trade or whatever you are, you've got to make a profit. And at the end of the day, you say, we're going to whittle away at his profit. You go out on the street with that one, you're not going to get a lot of buyers.
But
so that kind
is that potential for that bigger profit.
But he's still
That keeps them
gonna make 70%.
engaged and wanting to change some things or work things out and try to keep that there, right? Yeah.
So I hear what you're saying, Councillor, and it is very similar to the project management, exactly, but at the same token, this model, I understand, will provide a little more risk than our contractors may be used to. But there is, as Terry has indicated, there's also the opportunity, like never before, that they'll have the opportunity to see savings. Because you might be an expert in concrete, and I might be an expert electrician, but I can see mistakes occasionally that don't always get caught. And if it's in, I have a chunk of pie that's based on your piece of the pie too.
Those are sub-trades.
The sub-trades, as well as the general contractor, because the general contractor will, if I understand this correctly, will come down to, everybody will know what's in the pot. This is a little different from conventional where you say you're living with 7, I might want to live with 5, Councillor Fagnan and the other portion of the business might want 9. We're all going to be working on that pot together, which is going to be a little different.
Those contractors are pretty smart people.
They absolutely are. And I think that by able to leverage them to the fullest extent, and as the term I was familiar with, skin in the game, that if they've got skin in the game, they may want to help grow that piece of skin to the best of the ability, with us also being at that table as the owner working through this process. So it's quite unique. It's quite unique.
It is very unique. And as you bring forward, Your Worship, that accountability comes into that place, right? It's holding everybody accountable,
Yeah,
not pointing fingers.
No.
Whereas my aspect of this thing, there's no pointing fingers. Everybody's held accountable for any cost overruns, no matter what it is. And that's where that open transparency comes into play.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just curious if when this comes back to council, if you could provide some charts as far as the different scenarios, if there's cost overruns, what it looks like for all the parties, if it's on budget, what it looks like for all the parties, and then if it comes under cost, what it looks like for all the parties. Just that we have a good idea of really how that IPD system works, and the public will have a better understanding of what the goal is to try and reach with doing that type of system, other than expediting the process. Thank you.
I wanted to chime in at this point on a couple things, and Terry, thank you very much for that report. It covers it off very well. One of the things that I'd like to have added to the minutes or to the notes is the actual letter from Environment Canada Enforcement Branch, because I think that our residents need to fully understand the situation that we're in. And we've talked about this for over a year now. This council is not unfamiliar with the wastewater treatment plant. And bottom line comes down to I had an opportunity to attend a meeting in Saskatoon with an enforcement officer of the federal government, with members of our senior staff and administration in Saskatoon to discuss this very issue, because it's now been given a very clear timeline. And I'm not going to read the entire 7 pages, but I'm going to read a few excerpts just so that everyone at this table and everyone in our community understands the grave nature that this is, because it's got to a point that we're getting down to the cutting room floor, as they would say in some cases. But basically, upon contradiction of the not having a wastewater treatment plant in place by December 30th, 2020, could result in every person who contravenes this subsection 36, section 1 or section 3 is guilty of an offense and liable on conviction on an indictment, in the case of an individual, a fine of no less than $15,000, not more than $1 million for the first offense, and after that it goes from $30,000 to $2 million. Also talks about in the case that there's also imprisonment. And as the mayor, I wasn't planning on facing either of these in my term, and that carries us down here to the end of 2020 as we've been elected to. So I'm going to ask the city clerk to ensure that this is added to the minutes, but for people in the city that want to understand. And the Department of Environment was very clear. The city has been looking at this over a period of time, and our license is till the end of 2020 from the Saskatchewan Water Security Agency. And they followed it up with the federal enforcement because it is in their jurisdiction as well under the Fisheries Act. And I'm not going to even consider trying to get a city lawyer to try and challenge this. We're dealing with federal law. I think it's imperative that we realize that we've got to move this project forward. Like it or not in the perfect scenario. We still don't have the money yet either. And I'll share with council the latest update, waiting patiently again for our 2 provinces to come to some sort of funding arrangement to assist this project so we can in turn carry it to the federal government. All indications are there's conversations going on, but at this point we have not received official notification. So I'm hoping council will take this into account at the next meeting. We can try and move this forward in good faith from our perspective. We have some money, we have a contract, we can start, but we're not going to be able to finish without the funding partners. I've made that very clear to them. We're in a waiting game, but if we don't continue to move this project forward, we're going to be in trouble, and we're going to get behind the 8 ball. Today I can negotiate a little bit after hopefully we get the funding arrangement and talk about the actual realities. Because in speaking to our engineer from ISL, the folks that we've hired, they believe it's doable the sooner we get cracking. But the longer we wait, we just push this out. And if we miss a construction season, we're in trouble. And everything else, and if everything lines up, we can deliver. If not, then we'll be chasing this around the table coming in before the end of 2020. I don't know if anybody will want to be looking at jail time and serving on council because it could be one in the same. That's the news, and that's the way it is. So I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of that. I'm sure there'll be conversations in the community asking how did we get to this. There's a lot of factors that have happened, but we are what we are today, and that's what we're trying to deal with in this council. We can't undo the past. We're going to move forward, and we'll do the best that we can do with administration, and I appreciate the work that administration's poured into it, because they've poured a lot of work into it. And certainly there's been different directions in the past, but I think we have a direction, just a matter of moving it forward. That's all I have to say. Anybody else want to add in? Thank you, Terry.
Thanks, Terry. Thank you.
Moving back to the agenda then, on to item number 6, on to the governance and priorities matters. I'll look to 6.1, procurement and purchasing policies, and I'll look to the city manager.
From our operations department, Michelle Sauer will be presenting.
Good afternoon, Michelle, and welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. Subject matter, draft procurement and purchasing policy. To provide this committee here with a draft procurement and purchasing policy for your review, comments, and questions. The current purchasing policy number 008-2016 is in need of a full revision and update. The objective is to create a clear and concise policy to provide direction for administration when making purchases or procurement acquisitions. Back to you, Worship, for review.
Thank you. Certainly there's a policy that's, the draft policy is attached and, for our review. Certainly there's a lot of information there, I think, in the past, and one of the reasons that this council is sitting here is questions have been raised in the community about how does the purchasing policy work, what is the responsibilities of council to ensure that working with administration that the city residents, taxpayers are getting the best bang for the dollar that we talked about earlier today. One of the questions I had as I'm just scanning through to find the page number, and if I can read the charge in this, was we've seen various weightings of the dollars as part of the process in purchasing. One of the challenges I'm having is how much do we weight on the cost value to the relationship to the other portions, because when we're buying a shovel is pretty straightforward. It's a round-nosed spade, long-handled, wood handle. We know that we're comparing an apple to an apple. But when we're comparing, comparing technology, we're comparing services, it gets a little difficult. And this, yes, I believe, so we've got change orders. I'm looking actually for the percentage of the rating of the contracts.
Page 198 is the number you're looking for.
Thank you very much.
Section 12.5.
There we go. Thank you very much. 12.5. Exactly. So that's one area that, you know, we had a perfect example today. We looked at 60% of the equipment purchase, and in this recommendation, at least 50%. In other purchases, and I'm wrestling with that, because how much do we weight the value? Because as I say, if we're comparing, and I use the shovel as a very simplistic thing, but a Dell laptop computer with all the bells and whistles compared to another Dell with the same bells and whistles, do we compare that versus when we're looking for services? And because services do get to, they need to take into their experience, their expertise, and other things, past history and things like that. So that was an area of concern for me. Councillor.
Yeah, thank you for this. I think, again, pretty broad and a wonderful step forward. The only thing for me is that even today in our discussion, looking at the procurement of the reference back to the computer contract, I think it's really important somewhere in here, even as an attachment or addendum, that when we look at what we've defined, all those pieces that are in there, and I kept getting bumped off here, so I don't know where the heck I am. But I guess if we look at the columns that we have that says quality of proposal, we should have a few sentences about what a quality proposal is. You know, and the next one was, I don't remember what it was, you know, but all those pieces, but we should add a few sentences in there and sort of define what that is for us when we look at that. Because if I'm a purchase, if I submit a tender, arbitrarily, you know, we leave it so that I can say, yeah, well, I didn't like the proposal, it didn't look good to me, and on what basis? You know, did the proposal, so even some sentences that would say, you know, the proposal met the minimum requirements in terms of the data that was required and requested. Because we kind of have it as a baseline anyways. If you don't put stuff in that should be in for the proposal, it doesn't go any further. But that would be as kind of a bottom end of the first floor of the elevator. But if we want to know what a really good proposal is, does it suggest future contact, future contracts, other pieces and integration with other technology as this case would be. But just something to tease that out a bit so that one or two words, you're not left to running to, you know, a dictionary to say, well, I think that's what it means, and it doesn't. But I think it just puts a little more flesh on the bones. And it's kind of what you're talking about as well, because even when you go to services or you go to some other areas, what are those categories we use? And maybe there's a separate contract where it says you're buying, you know, capital goods versus services or something. So if I'm going into a service, I really want to put a lot of weighting on prior experience. I want to know your references really high. Those two areas for me would be absolutely essential. Yeah, so your price is lower, but guess what? If everybody else says your company is a jerk, and you know what, I talk to you on the phone, you're abrupt, I'm going, there's no way I'm hiring you. But you could be the cheapest. So I want to, you know, there would need to be a way to be able to discern between buying the shuttle, does it meet those minimum standards, to buying a service where there's a human element that needs to be identified and supported in some way.
So we're in the process right now of also building an attached procedure that will go along with this policy. Part of it is creating those documents. The new scoring criteria, everybody kind of did it differently, or everybody had a different idea of what a 5 might be and what a 2 might be. This new template would be a 1 to 10, specifically outlining if you give a 2, the next person would also give a 2 because it's,
perfect.
Yeah, so that would be in the attached procedure.
Yeah, I think that's terrific because it takes away the guessing game, and it also takes away from, well, why'd you give it 3, why'd you give it 2? It's pretty clear.
We're also trying to move a little bit more centralized, where your evaluation teams might have some more consistency with regards to who's sitting on them, to have that same mentality scoring each and every one to keep that consistency throughout the process.
Awesome, and I would just add again, striking the balance where you're buying a service, which is a humanistic piece, versus the product.
Yeah.
And how much does the humanistic piece come in with your reestablishing the product, where it's kind of a quasi-service and capital, so computers is a case in point.
Councillor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to be clear on the major kind of big changes in this policy from the other ones, the one that, you know, sticks out like a sore thumb to me is changing what purchases need a competitive process. So that's moving upwards again, because it was $15,000 in the old purchasing policy. Am I incorrect in that? And now it's moving up to 75.
So 75,000 for goods and services and 200,000 for construction is in the trade agreements. That's the legislation.
Yes, absolutely, and that's new from what was in 2016.
Yeah,
correct?
that's correct.
The 2016 policy.
Yeah.
I have a potential argument to throw out there, and this is based on my observations as a resident at the time. There was no reason to change the policy in the first place as far as what required a competitive process and what didn't. It seemed as though at the time a reaction to particular events that the public wanted a Your Voice night along with a revamped review of the purchasing policy, which was followed by changing the policy, and then, you know, what came down was the competitive number, like $15,000. That was the biggest change that came from that I saw, as well as adding some kind of teeth to the policy as well, which is great. But really the $15,000 for a competitive bid, even if it didn't have to go to council, really tied the hands, I think, of everyone working in the city, because all of a sudden so many things you have to purchase on a daily basis are having to go through some sort of competitive process that's just flat out ridiculous when you consider the size of the city's overall budget. So I'm definitely in favor of saving a whole bunch of money by getting away from doing the $15,000 and following the New West Trade Partnership Agreement, the $75,000 amount. It makes a lot more sense to do. It's going to save a lot more money. But yeah, there was, in my opinion, no need to change the policy because it appeared to be someone not following the policy that led to us changing the policy in the first place. So that's my opinion on the entire events that led to this point. But this really is just going back to a normal policy from what was an overreaction to poor use of the old policy. Other than that, the other thing I'd like to see is it specifically identifies not splitting purchases or projects in two if it to get it under the $75,000 mark, because that's unethical in my opinion, and I'd be disappointed to hear that it happened a whole bunch, but identifying that it's something that we don't want to happen, I think is really important. Thank you.
Councilor Baker.
Your Worship, under 5.1, the three companies are Canadian Free Trade Agreement, Northwest Partnership, Canadian European Union. Now, what's that one? Like, what's that doing in there?
I think that, let's take a look at it. I think it's part of what's happening at both provincial, federal, and international level. There's agreements that have been signed that have ramifications to us. That's what I have the belief, I'm on the understanding. We didn't sign the Canadian Free Trade Agreement. That was signed at the
Is that a mandated thing?
These are mandated for the match sector, yes.
Okay. If it's mandated, just another meddling kind of a thing.
Big brother reaching into our pocket.
You put that on the website and hope nobody bids, or what do you do? Goodness, how do you deal with somebody out of France? I mean, where's this world going? I got a couple more. I just got to get back to this multi-pages that I forgot to print today. When we're buying services under 12.8, sole source, for $5,000, goods and services are valued at $5,000 less. I'm not sure. This is a shovel with a handle on it for $9.95 at BB Mart. Like, what are we really trying to say there? Like, I mean, it would cost us. We could have Dave running around with his pickup looking for a shovel 6 different places. This doesn't make any sense unless I'm reading.
No, the last one says you don't have to sole source.
You don't have to.
No.
It said no alternate.
No, you don't have to bid it out. It says sole source procurement may be conducted for goods without a competitive process when they're less than $5,000. It's kind of written.
No, that's number C, but what about A?
But read the part in 12.8.
So A said if no alternates or substitutes exist.
12.8.
Yeah, read that top sentence.
So when there's only one supplier, Councillor.
It says but no alternates exist.
No, you need to go up to one. Look at one first. And
so if Public Works need a $20 scoop shovel, they got to go and get 2 or 3 prices.
No, they don't. No, they don't. This is, so the intention is, if I understand 12.8, from that perspective, is to lay out some guidelines so that we don't have, in some cases, there's only one supplier available. By all means, the intention is not to tie the hands of our staff.
I'm glad I'm wrong.
Yeah, to not tie the hands of our staff because they do it every day. They do it well. We're trying to make, this will hopefully improve the whole purchasing flow, the procurement card that's already behind us, but work that's being done to make this more efficient rather than less efficient.
Under 14.6, all purchases that are greater than $20,000 and have been permitted by council shall fall to the appropriate executive member for approval. We have those large purchases, even if they were when they were approved. Are you saying in the budget?
Yeah,
if they were approved in the budget, right or wrong, those always came back to council. Those big purchases. And I don't know if city manager wants to do that on his own particularly, unless it was emergency. But the big purchases always came back to council.
And they will, if I understand correctly, they will continue to come back to council with the signing authorities, once council's approved it, being myself and the city clerk, to execute on any value over 200,000. Yeah, 15 point.
Had too much stuff to read in the last 24 hours.
So yeah, it will, and exactly, Councillor, that answers it, 15.5. Anything over 200,000 will come before this council. And I think that's
14.6?
15.5 actually, is where it's stated.
No, I was reading 14.6.
Oh, okay. And I think 14.6.
And the penalty side of it. Who's the judge and jury there? Like, how do we do that?
I guess it would come to it would follow through likely to the city manager first, if I'm correct. And if someone that reports to the city manager, he would deal with it. After the city manager, it would become to this council. As laid out, I believe we've got from that perspective. And certainly based on the variance that's there, just as we've said, just as we went back to the procurement card, we laid out a series of events and disciplinary actions to follow. Someone simply contravenes something as small as that's one issue. When someone steps off the deep edge and goes right into the ditch past the white line, then we need to have a serious conversation.
Well, it said written warning to dismissal in there, and that's pretty harsh. Like,
well, I think that it's there if the violation is great enough. I think this council needs to have that ability that it's deemed that there's an issue that's beyond an issue, not just like I say, that's that comparison. So it's that variance that's there, Councillor, that it covers from A to Z. It's pretty broad.
we just don't want to scare everybody off from doing their job.
No, but I think that we've established directives in a series of events in this past year, including this policy that has given hopefully the staff, the administration, a clear indication of their responsibilities. And I think the reception I've received back is they appreciate being very clear and concise. They know what their job is. They've been given the tools and the equipment and the policies to do that. And from that perspective, because, and I hope in this watch that we don't have to implement any real disciplinary actions would be the preferred choice. But I think it has to have the meat in it. It's just like, I don't even want to compare it to the other systems of law that we have in this country.
But Your Worship, we do have, the penalties very similar to what we have with the cards. So I mean, those are, I think it's almost identical with the, what do you call our cards again? Procurement cards, same thing. But because I mean, part of it you're looking at is that, did you lose the receipt? Yeah, you're in violation. So you tell the guy, smart enough, hang on to receipts. But if you start buying more than you're supposed to and you keep doing it over and over again, you go to intent. And if your intent is to defraud or buy something for yourself personally that you shouldn't be buying, yeah, I think, you know what, see you later. And this policy gives our manager the tools to be able to deal with it.
Just to speak to 14.6, if I may, I think part of the rationale behind 14.6 was in our new purchase order program. For example, if we approved a $1 million tender, which would come through council, and then as we do a change or progress payment or anything like that, the new purchase order system, anything over $200,000 has to come to, if we bought the water department, for example, it would have to come to me, and if it's over $200,000, it would also go to the mayor every time. So what we're trying to get around here is within that purchase order program that we're allowing, once it's approved by council for Dawn or whatever department it falls under, to make that necessary approval in the purchase order program. I'll confirm for next council meeting, but I'm pretty sure that's the reasoning around that one statement. So we're getting log jammed around approvals in the purchase order program because it is stipulated that it currently follows our purchasing policy. So the mayor and I are approving everything over $100,000 essentially, which that's a lot of purchases to be approving. In a lot of cases, we don't necessarily know every detail of every purchase. that every department's making. So that's part of the rationale behind that 14.6.
Okay, good, thanks.
Councillor Feiglin.
Yeah, I just want to say I think it's such a great improvement from the past policy. It's just night and day, and I just think there's all kinds of direction. There's little tweaks here and there, but I think it's a great document, and I commend you for the job well done on that policy.
If I can send in a suggestion, I would like to, oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, I just had one other comment, and it was just around 17.1, kind of mentions the responsibilities. I was just curious if City Council is providing oversight through external auditors of this policy as well, because really that's the majority of the testing that an external auditor does, so that, you know, oversight of it in general isn't really described, even though in the nature of the city manager they're providing oversight, but there's also responsibility for council according to our charter to do that. So through the use of an external auditor, that's how we're doing it. So I don't know if there's any value of adding that to 17.1.
And that would be instruction potentially to the auditor that we choose to ensure that that policy is being looked at.
And even in our bylaw, I would wonder when in our hiring of an auditor that would be embedded in that or not. Because we have the opportunity to provide direction around which policies to audit as well.
City manager?
Yeah, that's something they would traditionally do anyway. We can make it as a note just to ensure that it's written. Yeah, we can do that.
I'd like to add a comment. I would like to see 12, back to 12.5. I'd like to see us consider moving that up just a little bit for the weighting. I might be wrong, and certainly I know this is, we moved to 60% and 45%, 10% on each level. That's, because it does play, it plays a significant factor. You know, once you go to 60, it takes a little bit more than that half, but it's something that I'd like to see council consider in administration, because I'm sure there's likely some debate in administration as to what that number is, but at the end of the day, I think that we need to be cognizant of the cost factor. And there is other pieces, but certainly the upfront cost required. Council?
I just have one other comment, and this is a story I read, I don't know if it was in the spring. Lac-La-Biche has made the decision to allow for heavier weighting to local contractors, suppliers, if it's under 75,000, which is allowable within the new West Trade Partnership Agreement. I just was wondering about thoughts around the table as to whether or not that's something we want to do. I think that it, you know, if you're talking about providing a product or something along those lines, then I don't see the value as having the cost too high, because those dollars are staying in our local communities, and then maybe you are putting a little bit of weight towards whether they're local or not. It's just something I was curious what the remainder of the group felt about it.
So, Councillor, if I could ask the question of you, would that be based on a business within the city limits? When we say local, where is that extent at? Because that's
as a Lloydminster business license.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess just to build on the mayor's comments around 12.5, and I'm just wondering if it's worthwhile adding in C that, you know, criteria outlining what, you know, each of those categories are will be provided in an appendix, so that it's not just that, those variables alone, but there's another reference to there's more going on around it.
Council?
Just in regards to my last comment is, I wouldn't mind, even if when this comes back, whether we see if it works or not for other communities, if we can just look into it, because you don't want to run into a situation where you're way overpaying for everything either. So just if maybe, it doesn't even have to be written into the next version of it, just so at least we can take a look at what Lac-La-Biche did or some other communities to see if it could work for us as well.
Yeah, I would agree with Jonathan. I think it's worthwhile, and they deserve a shot for sure. So we should try and support our local vendors and companies as much as we can. So I'd be in favor of looking at that for sure.
I have seen examples of as long as they're within X percent, be 5 or 10% of the low bid, or however you want to word that. But I guess as just we'd have to check to make sure that's permitted, I guess, and that has been, I've seen it done before. Just labeling a percentage as to what you're willing to pay more, I guess, if that's the case, for a local versus a non-local bidder.
I see some nods. I think that gives the administration a little bit more to work on, and I think that we're getting awful close, which is a good thing. Any other comments to send back to administration? Thank you, Michelle, for the work you put into it, and the team that, for the administration as a whole, because I'm sure there's several people with input on this, and always good discussion, because I think that when we're dealing with public dollars, we believe the taxpayers want to know that we're giving them the best value for their money that we can possibly get, and that's where we're headed to. So, thank you so much. From a perspective of anything else administration needs, then I don't think we need a motion. Report. All right. With that is everything that I see on the agenda up to item number 7, which is inquiries from the media.
Thank you, Your Worship. At this time, we have requests for yourself, Mayor Alders, as well as Councilors Dychuk and Parsons.
All right. I'll look to council for direction for recess.
Move for recess.
Councilor Dychuk moves, seconded. Councilor Fagin, all in favor? Opposed? Carried.